Hello, puppies and kittens. Welcome to another episode of Blasphemers Bible, and this one is the one just before that most humbug of holidays. And I wanted to share with you that a couple weeks back, Mark here on our panel, and I was where we were going to go to a Krampus walk in costume and everything, so that Mark and I were both going to be Krampus. And I've been looking forward to this for like a year. And sadly, on the night that we were going to do it, there was a violent thunderstorm, kind of ruined the whole thing. So the only Krampus thing I can do is in my ugly sweater. There you go.
Yeah, yes. That's going to have that Santa Satan vibe for all those crazy Christian moms.
Yes, I've always. All right.
Also, we can hear your parrot, Peter.
Okay.
Oh.
Oh, okay. So only we get to be annoyed.
Yeah.
That's how that's supposed to work. I need to be silent. No one can hear my parrot.
So, anybody have any opening comments before we dive in?
I mean, despite the fact that I woke up today at 3:45 a.m. because the Houthis shot a missile, no, nothing.
Oh dear.
Man, that's kind of hard to follow. But I do want to say that just kind of reading the next two chapters, I was very shocked to find out again just how brief that monarchy really was. Like from one father to the son, and then it's over. Like I feel like we're like in programmed to think like Israel was this very large monarchy, but no, it lasted very short. That was my first impression.
Yeah,
I mean,
that reminds me of the Eaton saying, shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations, you know?
Two things. One, the panel isn't showing on Peter's monitor. Yeah, thank you. And two, I think it's not uncommon that like empires are built rapidly and then collapse quite soon. I mean, the Carolingian Empire, I guess, is an example of Mongolian as well.
Yeah, those are pretty short-lived.
I know, but this is the only one being led by an all-powerful God, right? Like, this should be
God can't be better than Genghis Khan.
Yeah. A timeless.
Yeah, I mean, we also get like hints of, during the reign of Solomon, the great king who had such a large empire and impressed people from far away. We have at least two like rival kings who are like living in his land, but he's okay with it. It's a bit strange. Yeah,
it's the bragging is it gives the lady doth protest too much methinks vibe when you look at it without the sort of Christian need to believe that of course Solomon was the greatest and wealthiest and wisest king who ever was because God, and shut up. I mean, it's just standard.
I mean, it's a contest
propaganda.
between David or Solomon.
not just that, but he was so wise up until he decided to get wives.
Well,
which
yeah,
completely just dumbed him out.
And we are under the impression that
Just reread
Solomon
it.
is wise simply because he said so, because he said, "I have a very good brain."
Yeah,
Not
because
him. It's the Deuteronomistic historian.
It from God.
So,
yeah.
Solomon had the best words.
Yeah.
very best.
Dara O'Kane says, "What do you say to the idea that religion/spirituality gives me community or a sense of I'm part of something, being them myself? What should I replace God with to get that feeling?" I couldn't possibly tell you, because imagine trying to explain a heroin addiction to someone who's never had a drug. I have no relationship to what you're talking about. I never needed, there was no God-shaped hole in my heart. I never needed the church community. I've always had community with whatever I do. There's always other people that do the same thing. So, I mean, I'm in the atheist community, or I was once upon a time, I was in a LARPing community. I'm in a herpetology community and paleontology community. There's like all of this. And I just don't need it from church.
Community is, I think, an element that we can all agree is important in life and for human connection. But in the sense of having, because I do know what that grand sense of connection and community and grander thing, I think science has more to offer on that than faith ever did. I mean, think of what Sagan said that I remember most in Krauss's version of it. He said the most magical thing he knew about science is that all the higher levels of chemistry on the periodic table, everything past, the first few elements, all the iron in your blood and the oxygen and carbon that's necessary to make your body was forged in the hearts of dying stars. You are literally stardust, and the atoms that form your left hand may come from a different star than the atoms that form your right. You are part of the human story. You are part of the story of life on this planet, which is endlessly varied. And if that's not grand enough for you, I don't think a God would be any better.
Yeah, I never felt a spiritual connection, using spiritual in a very broad sense here, to any kind of wisdom that I'd ever heard from a preacher. It was watching Cosmos. I connected with Sagan so deeply. Anyway,
an alternative solution worked for me. Shun the concept of community, and you'll be fine.
Yeah.
Overrated for sure.
Yeah, I agree.
Lawrence, you say that you just can't find your way back to the surface.
Where's my fedora?
Also, after the show today, I'll be releasing a video on abortion and the Bible.
ooh,
And what's fun about it is I wrote it in 2 days while I was waiting for an exam to open up online. Because I had nothing to do, and I was like, you know what? I have nothing to do. No one's bothering me, so I decided to be productive instead. So I wrote it, and then yesterday got it shot and edited, and that's coming out.
outstanding. I wish I'd known that you were doing that. I mean, I'd run across all this stuff in like Talmudic references and such, and like all of this needs to be in here.
Sure, but the thing is, like, it wasn't meant to be like super detailed. It's not like a documentary thing. It's just like, here are some, some basics of it.
And in
Well,
fairness,
I'm going to thank you for that. I can't wait to see it, and I want to remind you that, and remind the audience too, that 5 times in the last week, people have tried to argue with me that and I don't know why they bring it up, but that people try to argue that the Bible does not say the Earth is flat, that the Bible is very clearly talking about a globe. And so I have linked your video over and over again to shut the fuck up.
Thank you. I wonder if any single one of them actually watched it, or any part of it.
You don't have to go very far into it before you know you're not going to make that argument.
I believe you.
One reason why you might be getting more emails than usual about that subject is because this past week was the final experiment.
Yes, that's right. The final experiment.
Yes.
That was so much fun. I loved it.
What have you seen? I've only seen like a few time
Okay,
lapses.
so
and stuff.
I saw MC Toon. He called like I forget the dude's name, but he called like there was this flat earther who said that there was gonna be like
Armed
army
penguins?
personnel with guns like at the ice wall, and they weren't gonna let anyone, like they wouldn't let anyone go to Antarctica, and he's like, "Where are the guns?"
Yeah,
And
where are
he's,
the
like,
guns?
calling him out, and he's shouting it into, like, because he's in Antarctica, shouting at this guy on the phone, asking, "Where are the
Nathan Oakley,
guns?"
that makes sense.
Wait, what did he say?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, where are the guns, Nathan? Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't see this. This
It
is
was
amazing.
beautiful. It was
The
beautiful.
final experiment was there's a guy who had some money, and he was like, "That's it. I'm gonna get some money, and I'm gonna send a couple of flat earthers and a couple of like debunkers to Antarctica," and ended up becoming quite a big group. And I think there were 4 flat earthers. 2 of them are actually like YouTubers and stuff. He took them to Antarctica in December because that is when you get the 24-hour sun. It's summer there, it's winter here. 24 hours in the Arctic Circle of darkness, 24 hours of sunlight in the Antarctica. And according to most flat Earth models, it would be impossible to have a 24-hour sun in the Antarctica because the Antarctica is like the edge. And in the winter, in our winter, their summer, the sun would be in the center. So how could it light up the center?
Of
I'm getting-
a disc.
whatever.
It's
Yeah.
geometrically impossible. But
Yeah,
there's
exactly.
the magic shape-shifting lampshade on the lamp earth.
Just to remind you that we have a book to read.
Yes, yes, we do. But this is also
Yeah,
fun.
it's just a bit of
Okay.
news.
So that's it's been a lot of fun because now like the copium's already coming out. Like some people like their first resort was to call people like Jaronism
Yeah.
you know, like bought and paid for or something, because he's a pretty popular flat earther, and he was like, you know what, because he went to Antarctica, he was part of the group, and he was like, yeah, there was a 24-hour sun here.
Did that?
What?
I can't believe
Jeranism actually did that?
Yeah, he did. Yeah, and
Jaronism.
he was like, you know, it's like, you know what? Yeah. So what the Glovers
figure
say
out.
happened? Would happen? Like, it was there. Like I saw with my own two eyes. There is a 24-hour sun in Antarctica. So it's it's been a lot of fun, and some of the copium includes that there are two suns. And that the sun
At least.
is somehow reflecting off the dome.
Yeah.
To this one spot.
Oh yeah,
Mirrors.
God has a magic mirror set up.
Yeah, the reason
And there were
for
also
that
people
was
claiming
that
that they
the
went.
shadows were different in some of the takes because they don't understand that a different
Perspective.
perspective of the camera will give you a different shadow. They're that stupid.
In
the
fairness,
shadows. There was
they-
even like something that
Yeah.
wasn't a shadow; it was just a box on the ground, and they're like, "See, the shadow doesn't match the tripod." It's like that's not a tripod shadow; that's just a box. You know.
What I don't understand about the flat Earth thing is it's so easy to disprove that. I mean, like if you just do like any air travel, any travel at all, really. I mean, how many times have you driven toward a mountain? You can only see the tip of the mountain. The closer you get to it, the more the mountain you see because the curvature of the Earth is in the way. Right? Does that happen for everybody here?
No.
Yep.
We don't have many mountains around here, but
Okay.
it's something similar.
For
Okay.
this,
Oh,
this,
yeah.
I've had
the
that
guy,
I
the
live
guy
amongst
who
many
who
mountains.
paid for the whole thing had everyone GPS tracked, so every flight. And funny enough,
Yeah.
all the flights went in a curve, just as if it was on a globe.
Yeah,
And
that's the
someone
next thing I
flew
was going to
from-
say. I
someone
had
flew from-
one significant flight that matches the flat Earth polar projection. One in my life. I flew from Johannesburg, South Africa, to Dallas, Texas, over Moscow and over the North Pole. I had no idea that commercial air travel actually went over the North Pole. I don't know why. We always see the map spread out like this. It just never occurred to me that you of course you could or would fly over the North Pole. Well, we did. We flew directly over the North Pole and then down over Hudson Bay and all through through Canada and everything back down to Texas. And when you draw that out on the polar projection map, it's effectively a straight line. That's the only flight I've ever had that matches that projection map. But if you want to fly from Santiago, Chile to Johannesburg, you're going to get a whole different experience.
Oh yeah. No,
Yeah.
it's
And I think someone
it's
on the
funny.
trip did that. One of his flights was to Santiago. I think,
15 minutes.
Okay.
Tomer, it's okay.
Okay,
not.
Tomer. All right. So who's reading first today?
I volunteer Lawrence.
No, man, I'm stuffy. I got up.
Excuse.
Yeah, excuse. Yes,
you.
excuse after excuse.
Isaac, you have a British
and
accent.
plus, I'm gonna have.
I
quite
can
a
read
few
if you
things
want.
to
Lawrence,
say.
up to you. Do you want to read or not?
No, I'm gonna have quite a few things to say for the next chapter, especially.
Yeah, let's
Good.
let Isaac read. I was saying
Okay,
he
all
has
right.
a British accent. He's a natural born narrator.
Okay, so read up through 25.
Okay. I Kings 11.
No, it's
Yes,
it's 1 Kings 1:1, which means it's not. You have to put those 3 kings together, and then they are 3 kings. See,
Oh.
it's
Ah,
reminiscent of
it's
Jesus.
That's
To be
what I
fair,
put.
it is Third Kings in Septuagint. So
That's what I
Oh,
put in my
interesting.
post for the show. 1 Kings 1:1.
That's good.
Okay.
Okay. 1 Kings 11. King Solomon loved many foreign women, in addition to Pharaoh's daughter, Moabite,
the story
Ammonite,
already.
Edomite, Phoenician, and Hittite women from the nations of which God had said to the Israelites, none of you shall join in them, and none of them shall join you, lest they turn your heart away to follow their gods. Such Solomon clung to and loved. He had 700 royal wives and 300 concubines, and his wives turned his heart away. In his old age, his wives turned away Solomon's heart after other gods, and he was not as wholeheartedly devoted to the eternal, his God, as his father David had been. Solomon followed Ashtaroth, the goddess of the Phoenicians, and Milcom, the abomination of the Ammonites. Solomon did what was displeasing to God and did not remain loyal to God like his father David. At that time, Solomon built a shrine for Chemosh, the abomination of Moab, on the hill near Jerusalem, and one for Molech, the abomination of the Ammonites. And he did the same for all his foreign wives, who offered and sacrificed to their gods. God was angry with Solomon because his heart turned away from the eternal, the God of Israel, who had appeared to him twice, and had commanded him about this matter, not to follow other gods. He did not obey what God had commanded. And God said to Solomon, because you are guilty of this, you have not kept my covenant and the laws that I enjoined upon you, I will tear the kingdom away from you and give it to one of your servants. But for the sake of your father David, I will not do it in your lifetime. I will tear it away from your son. However, I will not tear away the whole kingdom. I will give your son one tribe for the sake of my servant David and for the sake of Jerusalem that I have chosen. So God raised up an adversary against Solomon, the Edomite Hadad, who was of the royal family of Edom. When David was in Edom, Joab, the army commander, went up to bury the slain, and he killed every male in Edom. For Joab and all Israel stayed there for 6 months until he had killed off every male in Edom. But Hadad, together with some Edomites, servants of his father, escaped and headed for Egypt. Hadad was then a young boy. Setting out from Midian, they came to Paran and took others from Paran along with them. Thus they came to Egypt, to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, who gave him a house, assigned a food allowance for him, and granted him an estate. Pharaoh took a great liking to Hadad and gave him his sister-in-law, the sister of Queen Tapenes, as wife. The sister of Tapenes bore him a son, Genubath. Tapenes weaned him in Pharaoh's palace, and Genubath remained in Pharaoh's palace among the sons of Pharaoh. When Hadad heard in Egypt that David had been laid to rest with his ancestors, and that Joab, the army commander, was dead, Hadad said to Pharaoh, "Give me leave to go to my own country." Pharaoh replied, "What do you lack with me that you want to go to your own country?" But he said, "Nevertheless, give me leave to go." That's it, right?
No. Keep it on.
Yeah,
Sorry?
go through 25.
Keep going.
25, okay.
Yeah.
Another adversary that God raised up against Solomon was Rezon, son of Eliada, who had fled from his lord, King Hadadezer of Soba. When David was slaughtering them, he gathered some men and became captain over a troop. He is this Rezon. He became captain of a troop. They went to Damascus and settled there, and they established a kingdom in Damascus. He was an adversary of Israel all the days of Solomon, adding to the trouble caused by Hadad. He repudiated the authority of Israel and reigned over Aram.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have two relevant questions regarding, first of all, the wives and concubines, because it's my understanding that the duties a husband owes his wife includes giving her at least the opportunity to bear children. And 700 and 300 is 1,000. Now, are you not allowed to be intimate with your wife on certain days of the Jewish calendar?
Not
I
allowed
guess.
to?
I mean, Yom Kippur maybe.
I think
Yom
I think in
Kippur.
general fast days, part of
Yeah,
fasting
fast
is,
days.
is
Fast
not-
days
not
and
having
like
sex.
Sabbath isn't an issue. That's not an
No.
uncleanliness
If anything,
thing. Or,
it's a good time to do it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. It's a blessing. Okay. Well, just because I was trying to do the math and figuring, if there were holy days and possibly, someone gets sick, he would have to have a threesome very nearly every day just to give his wives their rights once a year. And while that might sound fun for the first few days, I'm guessing you're going to get sore.
Yeah, it doesn't.
I
doesn't
mean,
add up.
every day for a year, that's exhausting. I'm sorry. Also, I love the idea that divine wisdom from God may be powerful, but it's not more powerful than dem titties.
I mean, it seems the implication here seems to be that he isn't following this rule, and like in a harem, you're gonna have fighting over the king's
Perhaps you only
so
need to give rights to your wives and not your concubines. They're just there for fun.
But concubines sometimes could be more popular with the king than some of his wives, but it's legally they're different. The main distinction is that they're legally different. I don't think concubines are entitled to, as you say, conjugal rights. Not entitled to it.
Not in the same way, yeah.
But I think there's also like inheritance things, and I don't think their children are considered like true sons. I don't know exactly.
I just have to wonder that with this many wives and concubines, that'd cause a king to have a mighty sore scepter.
You see, that's what I was saying. It's the chafing. The chafing. At some point, you're gonna need a day off or a week.
I thought you were making a pun on sphincter, but then I realized that this is not that type of queen.
Well, as Matt White pointed out in the comments, there is always the loophole. So,
I think maybe the point is that it took up to 1,000 wives to convince wise Solomon to worship other gods.
Yeah, and that brings me to another question. I was going to try to wait for Tomar's commentary on it, but I mean, the translation that I have doesn't list the gods that Isaac just read.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, so... Yeah, Isaac, in verse 5, you said, my version says that Solomon followed Astarte and also Milcom. What were the two?
Yeah, so
Ashtoreth and someone else?
No, he said
Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Phoenicians, and Milcom, the abomination of the Ammonites.
Okay, gotcha. All right.
I have Molech, who's also mentioned later. So it's there. Yeah, there seem to be
Molech is also mentioned later.
I mean, it's not.
How was this? How was my version translated as Astarte? I mean, this is not
because in English, I mean, it's the same. It's not Asherah. It's Ashtoreth.
I think the difference. Yeah, I think the main problem is Ashtoreth and Asherah are like Hebrew names, and they're normally associated with Astarte, but they're also associated with another goddess who has a similar name. So it's like, you could translate it as Astarte, but we're not actually, maybe we're not exactly sure if that's.
I think Ishtar.
I think Ishtar and Astarte
was
are the same.
Also the queen of heaven.
I think Ishtar is just like the Sumerian or like
Ugaritic. It's Ugaritic.
Oh,
it's Mesopotamian, but it's attested in Ugaritic scriptures.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure I looked this up before, but
Cogan writes that
I don't want to dwell on that. I just saw a potential conflict there, at least in my understanding.
Yeah, Astarte and Ishtar are the same name, but Astarte is Hellenized from Ashtart, and Ishtar is just the Akkadian. Yeah.
It's Cogan amusing that you can have so many different names for similar gods and goddesses, and
I want to be careful about that because I've heard Ishtar and Yostra being closely associated because it sounds similar, along with Astarte, and some of those connections are legitimate, but not all of them. Like who the fuck is Easter? Is not always Ishtar. Yeah. Lawrence?
Yeah, Sumerian is Inanna. Sorry.
Oh, I know that Digital Hammurabi does have a video on their relationship.
They're good, and they have real expertise in that area. But I mean, it's really hard to communicate if you're not an expert. The degrees of how you have the same god, but it's not quite the same god, but it's a different version, but they're similar, and depending on whether you were at war or not, they might be considered the same god, or they might be totally different.
When we're talking about the Asherah, we're either talking about the goddess that was married both to Yahweh and also to Amen or Amen Ra, or we're talking about a celebratory pole that isn't necessarily associated with that god.
Wait, Asherah married to Amun. I don't remember that ever. I remember Asherah. So yeah, we do have like the inscription of like Yahweh and
the pronunciation of the word then was Atharat.
Yeah. Atharat,
Oh, okay,
Asherah,
yeah.
They're the same goddess.
Oh, okay.
It's also considered as a manifestation of Baal's name.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to stop holding that up. I'm going to read a couple of comments here because they're already stacking up. We got Halas Dunle. This says, what are the best places to live in the U.S. as an atheist? Well, I've only lived in limited places, and I tend to choose the worst ones to living as an atheist. I live in Texas, so that tells you I don't have much sense, where I just want to be in the frying pan. I want to be in the heat of the action as an activist, but my wife wants to move to Richmond, Virginia, because we know a large Satanist group out there of really neat people, and she wants to be closer to them.
Fair.
Which I fully understand.
I can certainly see why, especially in the current climate, and especially because, well, it's she's going to have enough trouble in the next couple years having any sort of human rights as a woman, much less a woman who is not entirely white. And we all know how good American Christians are with those kinds of things. So
yeah. Then we got a comment from, I think, Mojo, who says that Yahweh is the God of Israel. What is the name of the Dutch God of the Netherlands? Because I am Dutch Moroccan, or Dutch, we Moroccan patents and family. I don't understand
with Moroccan
the question correctly, I guess.
He has Moroccan parents, and I already told him that the Dutch God is named Gonna Go For It. Ik verwacht je in de kerk morgen, Mojo.
Yeah.
All right,
Never
and then
change.
Atheist Carpenter says, wouldn't at least some of his wives want more attention from him purely as a status thing within the harem?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, all of them would.
Well, he's got to care more about his wives than his concubines, right?
I mean, I think Pharaoh's daughter is more important because she's mentioned specifically.
Yeah. Seems
Sure.
to be the
Yeah, that
favorite
would have been a
wife.
strong political point.
Definitely.
So she's like the madame of the harem, if you may.
Yeah, normally
there's
the,
another word for it.
yeah, normally the queen or the normally the queen, like the first wife, would be in charge of the harem, but sometimes it could be like, the mother-in-law, like the mother of the king or something like that. And
So Bathsheba
they
would be in charge.
you needed to like fight for attention, because if the king wasn't into you, the servants would ignore you. You wouldn't get heating. You'd be like far away in like some cold palace. Yeah.
What do you mean I'm not into you? I'm into you for at least 5 minutes a day.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It seems to be the implication is when you have 700 wives and 300 concubines, you're probably only going to have, a dozen that you're actually like talking to all the time, and maybe people would like come in and fall out of favor, but like the vast majority would be completely ignored, and that would be that's seen like as a bad, and especially like the whole thing with the religions. Some of the traditional commentaries don't like to think that Solomon was actually doing worshipping of other gods. More, they were doing the worshipping, and he was ignoring it. Yeah, he turned a blind eye to what they were doing, and that's the punish, and that was the sin of his.
Well, the text is blaming the wives for sort of.
Yeah, it's always blaming the wives, especially for straying, like straying away from God. Like, it's gonna happen through. It's very Deuteronomistic. It happens throughout Ezra and Nehemiah. It happens throughout the Deuteronomistic history. It happens in a lot of the prophets as well. It's crazy that like every single time that people start to build like altars to other gods, or like anything, especially high places, I should say that high places are going to be the most important thing for the rest of this narrative. That is like problem number one that God wants to be solved, and it just isn't until like the very end. But at that point, oh no, it's too late. Yeah, the women are always blamed for this. It's like they're always blamed for the men
Everything.
doing this.
Yeah.
I am thinking that, that he gets to be into her 5 minutes a day. No, it wouldn't be. It would be 2 minutes, and it would be every second Thursday because there's 600 of them.
I told you,
700.
mandatory threesomes. Well, 1,000 if you count the concubines, but I'm assuming some of them just
the amount of additional effort that you naturally put into a threesome, it would know that would be.
Exactly. I'm just saying it's
Well,
not.
no, think about it this way. Think about it this way. So you put in half the effort in like sex with two people, but you only have to put in a third of the effort.
You sound like Chazal. Just saying.
That has not been
That sounds
my
like
experience.
something that Chazal will debate about.
If
How
you're
did,
putting in
how
that
did
little
Solomon have
effort,
sex with all these women in a year? Yeah.
if that's the
Put
amount of
them all in a
effort you're
big
putting
boat
in,
and spin it
you will not
around.
be getting threesomes.
Yeah.
It seems the implication seems to be that he's not doing the marital rights. Like maybe some of these women might not have ever had relations with the king at all. Like they could have just been like, oh, this one is gonna fan me and this one's gonna play an instrument for me. Oh, I like having lunch with this one. She's a good cook. Like, it's all over the place with this, and it seems to be that whoever's writing this is condemning it. Like this is not a good idea for a king to have this many wives.
It is. Well, I mean, this is part of the patriarchal part that I bitch about is this attitude of, everything is always a woman's fault. Women are temptresses and vile and evil and rah, and how dare they? And everything we do wrong is because some woman made us.
Although, just to be fair, I do think it's a little funny that Lilith just said all those words.
Yeah,
because Lilith.
Yeah.
I don't know. I find it kind of attractive. So on verses 1 and 2, I'll start the commentary.
Thank you.
By marrying many foreign women, Solomon has transgressed the commandment in Deuteronomy 7 verses 1 through 5 and 17:17. Traditionals wrote that the mention of Pharaoh's daughter may indicate that either he loved her more than the other women, according to Rashi and Kara, that she was the first to corrupt Solomon, according to Kimchi and Abravanel, or that she made him turn against the Torah more than the other women, according to Gersonides. And Fritz comments, to avoid any contradiction with the glory of the Solomonic rule, the turning away from Yahweh under the influence of foreign women is placed in the period when Solomon was old, in verse 4. Specifically, a negative attitude against non-Israelite women is assumed that originated during exilic and post-exilic times. Marriage to a foreign woman was probably the exception during the monarchical period, but not necessarily a reason for concern, as the Aramean women in the harem of David show, compare 2 Samuel 3:3. It is only the Deuteronomistic law, written toward the end of the monarchy, that generally forbids the marital union with the non-Israelite population, Deuteronomy 7, 1 through 4, but also allows for certain exceptions in Deuteronomy 21, 10 through 14. This ban on certain forms of marriage is intensified in post-exilic times. Ezra judges mixed marriages in a negative way and enforces their dissolution.
Ugh. It's Deuteronomistic, but it's also something very, like in the post-exilic, you had a lot of that same thing with the how dare you marry foreign women and casting out the Israelites who had actually remained because they had intermarried with the locals as if they were supposed to just, I don't know.
Yeah, and the thing about that is, like, even in Ezra and Nehemiah, one of the things that they point out first is like, listen, you got to thank the Persians. They did a lot of good stuff for us. They were very nice, but like we shouldn't be sleeping with them. So like even after acknowledging the help that they had just received, they were like, we gotta do our own thing though.
Just because of Lilith's little tirade, I went to get a different beer, and can you see that one? Yeah.
Temptress.
good.
Okay.
Temptress, excellent. Well,
Mm.
like I said, the only thing more powerful than the ancient wisdom of the all-powerful, immortal, invisible God is dem titties.
Mm.
I can attest.
Okay, so on verse 3, the number of Solomon's wives is generally viewed as an exaggeration. In comparison, Rehavam had 18 wives, according to 2 Chronicles 11:21, and Abiah had 14 wives, according to 2 Chronicles 13:21. Cogan notes that the number of Solomon's wives is composed of two typological numbers, 300 and 700. Fritz writes that the number of Solomon's wives has no significance for the course of the narrative. It only matters that his love for the women causes his heart to turn away from Yahweh as the only God. Although verse 3 is generally taken to be part of the H's account, DeVries writes that if verse 3 was part of the H's expansion, it wouldn't have mentioned concubines, since the H only complains that Solomon's wives seduced his heart. Thus, he takes verse 3 to be, quote, original archival material, end quote, in this case, a popular ancient tradition about Solomon.
It makes sense that from an ancient archival perspective, having a great number of concubines would be seen as a sign of wealth, and obviously having foreign wives is a sign of recognition from foreign powers, which means you have more grand, power in the local ecosystem of kings. But yeah, it's the copium after the fact. Oh my God, the copium.
Atheist Carpenter says that would explain the obsession with virgins because they wouldn't know what they weren't getting.
Yep. Yeah, it's these are conservative men and very religious men are not known for their prowess with women. Sometimes they tell the whole world, Mr. Shapiro.
But in this country, they were marketing how they have special toilets for the better endowed. And for whatever reason, it's always Republicans doing these kind of promotions.
There's so many better toilets out there in the world, and America just wouldn't even think about using any of them because it's foreign. There's toilets that have like toilet seat covers on like a roll, and it comes out one side and goes around the toilet seat and goes in the other side, so every person that uses it gets a fresh piece of plastic or whatever.
Sanitary. Yep. Yeah.
Amazing.
I've seen those, and yeah, it's let's
and
face
bidets
it,
and everything. Yeah.
Why are we talking about it?
I just
Very
think
royal.
America is like that person who really needs to look good on social media. And so like it's all about the bragging. It's all about everything's bigger in Texas, and everything is in fact not bigger in Texas. But it's very important that you pretend that it is.
Well, yeah. Well, I guess to be fair, I think America needs to fix the gaps between the wall and the door in most toilets before they can get onto the more advanced stuff. But yeah.
Bruno Zygerts offers $2 Californian. I guess that's probably Canadian. Says the problem with 600 wives is 600 mother-in-laws.
Oh yes.
Wait, why are you saying 600? It's 700.
It's 1,000, and that I think explains why he's praying to other gods. He needs all the help he can get.
Yeah, I'm betting he's praying to everyone. My
I mean,
mother-in-laws are coming.
If you had 700 wives, I doubt you had 700 mother-in-laws. Some of them would be sharing, I think. There would be some siblings in there.
I think definitely for Solomon, it was not more money, more problems, but more wives, more problems.
Yeah,
and he's about to get hit with the worst one. So.
Yeah. Okay, on verse 7, Sweeney comments, verse 7 notes high places for Chemosh of Moab and Molech of the Ammonites. The high place to Molech is located on the Mount of Olives, the large hill that stands immediately to the east of the city of David, across the Kidron Valley. Although verse 5 identifies the Ammonite god as Milcom, verse 7 identifies him as Molech. 2 Kings 23:10 and Jeremiah 32:35 indicate that child sacrifice to Molech took place in the Hinnom Valley, situated along the southwestern edges of 8th century Jerusalem. But 2 Kings 23:30 notes a shrine dedicated to Milcom on the Mount of Olives.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, like, is there a confusion here between Milcom and Molech? Are they the same god, kind of?
I think there's a confusion.
I mean, I've heard that it's not really a fact that Molech was an actual god that was worshipped, but rather it was more of a type of sacrifice, perhaps even to Yahweh.
Yeah, but in the Bible, he's taken as a god.
Right.
I have to wonder how many of Solomon's wives were named Mary. How many of them were some variant of Elizabeth? How many Lisas, Lizas, Elspeths, Beths, all of that? That was like my high school class. Half the female student body was named some variant of Elizabeth. It's like dozens of Lisas. So Solomon has you're Lisa number 14.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
in my classes it would be Lisa S and Lisa B. So what would he?
I mean, he seemed to have a penchant for foreign women, so I'm guessing there weren't as many,
Ooh, Svetlana tonight.
Oh.
Arn, if Piton was still here, he would say that some of the wives were called Christina.
Yeah, that was also half of my student body, but not just of the girls. It was half the student body of the entire student body, male and female. They were all named Chris. I was at a party. There was a call for Chris. There were 6 people in the room named Chris, male and female. There was one guy had 2 girlfriends. All 3 of them named Chris.
It was different by me. Like, I was in like a year of 20-ish boys, and like half of them were called Menachem Mendel, and we used to call each other by their last name.
Yeah, I do that too. I know so many people named David that I don't call any of them David. They all
you know
go by
what, David?
I call them by their last name or by their nickname.
Well, you know what, David? We should be talking about. No, I'm kidding. We should be talking about his son Solomon. So I think we're probably a bit off topic.
Yeah, I should note that the Losanic recension of verse 7 has Milcom instead of Molech. So.
Oh, for the second one.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, that's interesting. That makes sense because I don't think Molech is called the abomination of the Ammonites anywhere else, right?
That
reminds me, when it was time for me to name my child, I didn't want to do a variant of Elizabeth or Eliza or any of those common names. Just come up with a completely new name that nobody else has. So I did.
It wasn't like tragedy misspelled kind of a vibe. I hope.
No, I named her Abomination of Amalek. Malal Halal Hashbaz.
Mahel Shalal Hashbaz. There we go.
My brother just had his like 9th kid, and they were having what should we call what's the name going to be? Like all the good ones are taken already. So I was like in the family chat being like, Maher Shalal Hashbaz and Ish Boshet, whatever the one. What was the other one? The long one?
Mephi-Boshet.
No, not that. I mean,
if I had 9 kids, one of them would be that Hashbaz. Yes.
Fair enough. At some point, you have to. You just got to go with what you can. Maybe there's some kind of you can cast lots for a name if you have enough kids.
Yeah, this is my son Camaro. This is my daughter Corvette.
Someone in the comments like 9 kids. His poor wife. I'm like, well, it's more her thing. She has a blog. She has a blog about it.
Yeah, I mean,
dear.
How to be a parent of.
I mean, I'm a bit off topic, but my father has also grown in a Haredic environment, and his sisters have like 13 or 11 children, depending on who you ask.
Wow.
Yeah.
Depending on who you ask.
No, not on who you ask, on who you're talking about. Like, I don't remember.
If I would have a 9th kid, I would know a name last, no matter what the gender is.
Yeah, I mean, like
Yeah.
my family is quite small, so like on average, it's like 9 on each family. So I have about like 100 first cousins. Yeah, whatever.
The reason I don't have 9 kids is because I keep coming up with name suggestions from the Cthulhu mythos.
Ooh.
And your wife cut you off. Very sensible of her.
No, we are not naming our daughter Yog-Sothoth.
Okay, I'll continue I'll continue on verses 11 through 13. Josephus in Antiquities 8:197 wrote that the Lord spoke to Solomon through a prophet. Kimchi specifies that this was Achia, the Shilonite. Sweeney calls verses 11 through 13, quote, a classic example of the prophetic judgment speech, end quote. He notes that the violation of Yahweh's commands is a matter of DH theology, and therefore plays an important role in justifying the qualifications of the divine promise to David. He writes that the abrogation of Yahweh's promise to David is a major theological problem for DH, i.e., why did Yahweh abrogate the divine word to David? He writes, quote, the text addresses this problem by supplying two qualifications for Solomon's punishment in verses 12 and 13. The first is that the punishment will take place after Solomon's death, which follows from the statements in 2 Samuel 7:12-16, that David's sons will suffer if they will do wrong. But it creates a theological problem by ensuring that the guilty party does not suffer the consequences for his own actions. Yahweh's statements call for punishment of an innocent man. An attempt to address this problem follows in verse 13, which adds that Solomon's son and the house of David will retain one tribe. In this manner, the text can maintain that Yahweh will keep the promise of eternal rule to the house of David, even as it loses control of the other tribes. But the problem of punishment applied to an innocent man remains. This may be explained only by DH's view of collective punishment applied to a corporate entity, whether that might be Israel, which suffers for the sins of Jeroboam and the other northern kings, Judah, which suffers for the sins of Manasseh, or the house of Achab, that is, Achab's sons, who suffer for the sins of their father. On verse 14, Hadad the Edomite. DeVries notes that Haddah is a divine appellative common. DeVries notes that Haddah is a divine appellative common in Northwest Semitic cultures, and also the name of several Edomite kings. Compare Genesis 36.
Hadar or Hadad?
Haddah.
With that, oh, like ending in a vowel, like Haddah?
I think so. If I wrote
Yes,
it
Haddah.
correctly.
Because
It's just Haddah.
Haddah.
Because in over here he's called
Oh,
Hadad,
Hadad.
which means
It's
more to do with like belovedness, right?
Yeah, but it's like the one part of the word. Let me just check.
I mean,
No, sorry, it's Hadad. It's Hadad. Sorry,
there's
it's Hadad.
Hadad. There's
It's a mistype of. Sorry.
Okay, you meant Hadad. Okay.
Yeah. I
So I
thought
would think
Hadad
like
was
Haddah would have a different like root. It would mean
Yeah.
something differently. Yeah.
Yeah. So by saying that, so I said in compare Genesis 36, 35, and 36. By saying that Hadad was from the royal seed, quote unquote, it indicates that he had not yet become king at the time of the narration. And also,
But, I mean,
should
it
note
says he
that
was a boy. It says he was a young boy in verse 17.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, but it's from the royal seed, so yeah, it also can indicate. And also regarding the adversary, it's the Hebrew it's Satan. So again, I mean, I found only Cyprian. I found only Cyprian who said that the adversary is the devil.
Satan.
Yeah,
Or as we say it,
they do
Satan.
that stuff in Chronicles too. People do that thing with Chronicles as well, because it says that Satan made David take the census, but just
It says like
an adversary. Yeah.
it says that God did it. It's made him do it now.
No, that's what it says in Kings, not in Chronicles. In Chronicles, it says Satan.
Right.
It's we can't be expecting the Bible to remain consistent. You know better than that.
Well, I mean, within the context of the Hebrew Bible, Satan, the Satan, is seen as like an angel of the Lord. So It wouldn't have,
Yeah,
God
the
raised,
opposer.
God
Yeah,
came
it
up
wouldn't have
against him,
been
and
like
God sent an angel against him. Is pretty much the same thing.
yeah, it wouldn't have been the devil with pitchfork and
Yeah.
No. It's a very different concept of the devil, but it is the origin of the other. But at the same time,
Mhm.
I just think it's, there's all of this copium to try and make it sound like God didn't break his promise to David, when the truth is, as Ingersoll pointed out, God made innumerable promises to Abraham and to all his kin after him, and he broke all of them. Never kept a single promise that he made. Never once. And the copium to try and pretend that he was not a liar is responsible for half of this damn book.
Yeah, I know I said that I would bring grocery prices down, but the best I can do is bring back polio.
Hmm.
Oh, your country is so fucked.
Okay, so on 15 through 17, traditionals and modern commentators take these verses as a reference to what is said in 2 Samuel 8:13, reading Edom instead of Aram, following the Septuagint. Fritz, however, writes that the subjugation of the Edomites by David presupposes the preservation of the people.
Got a comment from Bruno Zygerts, offers $5 Canadian, thank you, and says, this reminds me of the Star Trek episode I, Mudd, where Harry Mudd receives 500 android versions of his ex-wife.
Oh, right. Okay, it's a reference to iRobot. Okay, iMud.
And then Matt White says, Aaron, so the reason you have that many snakes is so you can use the names you like from 20th century horror literature. Tis true.
Yeah, if he was a Tolkien fan, it would be spiders, I guess.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's strangely, again, off topic. I know Tromer is going to react, but my daughter-in-law, she's all about the spiders. She has tarantulas and brown recluses and black widows, and she breeds them.
Is it difficult?
It's just that she's got a whole bunch of spiders.
And which one is named Shelob?
I don't think she has one of those yet, but I don't know, because she'll suddenly have 300 more than she had yesterday.
She's
Nope.
breeding up. She's breeding up to Shelob. Let's
There
see
you
how
go.
big they get first.
All right, Tomer, quit being off topic. Let's go.
Fuck you. So on verses 18 through 20, on verses 18 through 20, Sweeney notes that Hadad's narrative adopts motifs from the Joseph narrative. Both found favor in the eyes of Pharaoh, Genesis 41:37-45. Hadad married Pharaoh's sister, whilst Joseph married Asenath, daughter of Potipharah. He writes, quote, the use of motifs from the Exodus and Joseph traditions makes a point about Hadad and Solomon. Hadad appears as a second Moses, and Solomon appears as Pharaoh in a reversal of roles that raises critical questions about Solomon and his rule.
Interesting bit of Uno reverse.
I guess.
The literary techniques that are used are interesting, to say the least.
Yeah. In speaking of, there's something about critical scholars that I've read mention that even like the grammar in the way that stuff is being described is not like there is a narrative that's telling you like the how things went in history, but rather more of a report or an evaluation of what Solomon did, and hence the resulting calamities.
It definitely gives the impression that they were taking from, like, there might have been some sourcing from just ordinary court records, but there's also the, putting in the angle you want, but it doesn't have a nice narrative flow the way you'd get from a good author. It's you can tell even in the translation that it's piecemeal. And that's one of the things that makes so much sense out of the scripture, that made so much sense the minute I was actually told it and understood it. And I was like, oh, and then I couldn't unsee it, and I could never pretend it was this universal text of God and all that. I'm like, no, it's just bleh. It's a patchwork of a patchwork of a patchwork.
Okay, now on verse 19 about Tachpenes. Modern commentators suggest that the name is a transliteration of Te Chamat Nasu, which in Egyptian means the wife of the king. Cogan writes that it is unclear if the author knew the meaning of the Egyptian word, or that he considered it to be a personal name, much like Pharaoh, king of Egypt.
Yeah, I had a question about that too, because I mean the king, and he's going to brag that I'm in charge because I have Tepenis, and then
shut
he's
up.
going to say, "But I am Tepenis."
Yeah.
Good point.
Just because I'm older doesn't mean I'm mature.
Nobody has ever accused you of being mature. I promise.
That's so interesting that the what like first of all they don't mention the king's name. They seem so it's like you said, Pharaoh seems to be thought of at least by some biblical authors as a personal name that was common, like a royal name that the kings of Egypt would call themselves. I am Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and then it seems to that he seems to have done the same thing with this word for he thinks of as the name of the queen Tachpenes, which you're saying is possibly just means wife of the king in Egyptian.
Yeah.
It's honestly though, it's actually when you're doing all the copium and the after the fact stuff, it's a really smart way to use Pharaoh, because you don't have to cross-reference with the Pharaoh. Which Pharaoh was it? Oh, well, that's 300 years after the other one. That doesn't make any sense. It's just Pharaoh. It's just there's this everlasting crown in Egypt that's usually evil, but sometimes God uses, but he's still a dick, so don't trust him.
Yeah, I mean, later we do get names for pharaohs.
Right, in this chapter, right, we're going to see it. And then it's like, oh, King Shishak. Not Pharaoh Shishak, not King Pharaoh Shishak, but just King Shishak. Which I guess you could use it as a bit. Maybe it's the reason why they wrote it like that is because it would have been confusing. How could there be more than one pharaoh at the same time? So it's like, maybe King Shishak is like a,
they do have some names. I'm just saying that using pharaoh as a generic is a good way to avoid bringing up problems and contradictions too much.
Oh yeah.
I've heard that the term pharaoh was actually more of a pejorative used by ancient Israelites to refer to the Egyptian king, but the Egyptians themselves never really called their king Pharaoh. They just called him king. Although there were other epithets and other names too.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily something that they embraced as much as it looks like when you read of this in the Hebrew Bible.
Yeah, I mean, I think they do use the term pharaoh depending on which Egyptian period you're talking about. And it's one of the titles of the king. I think it means something like royal house. Pur is house, and it's the same character that leads to Bet, which is a house, and he
And then we have a comment from Ronaldo Martinez, who offers $5. Thank you, and says, "Is this chapter inspired the name of Pat Robertson's The 700 Club?"
He wishes.
Yeah.
Oh, he wishes. That gross old man.
Okay. On verse 20 about Genuvat, the exact meaning of this name is unclear. Sweeney writes that the name may be based on an Egyptian name, but its present form is derived from the root Gimel Nun Bet, to steal, which suggests derision. Fritz writes that the name is attested in Old North Arabic. Hallat notes the Arabic Junub, meaning guest not belonging to the tribe. In Saphitic, the masculine name Ganav means stranger.
Interesting. They all seem to have like negative connotations. Yeah, it could be that maybe there is an Egyptian name that it's based on, and then they just went with like a Hebrew, letters and whatever that kind of make it sound like he was a thief or whatever.
Turning your people's names into bad puns as a cut against them is, I mean, it's a good schoolyard tactic, but it's also something that we see a lot in the
like
text. I mean,
oh my God, what's there's because Bethel is turned into Beth. What's House of Wickedness? Beth
Beth Boshet?
No.
Really?
something
Why
else.
would it?
Sorry.
Oh no,
But
Beth
L
with
is
something else.
I thought Bethel is fine.
No, Bethel's the good one, but then
Yeah. Oh.
When it's bad.
to say that it's bad, they're
Oh.
like, oh, it's not the house of God, it's the house of wickedness, and
But yeah, maybe like Alil or something like that.
Beth Ba.
No.
Alil.
Shit.
Like,
Beelzebul, Beelzebub.
You know
No,
how
they're
like
doing
yeah,
it because after the next chapter we're gonna see why they start calling was it Beth Shem or Beth I don't remember.
Beth Shemesh? Beth.
No,
What does Beth Sarim mean?
nothing.
yeah, like
Okay.
Belial, right?
Hmm.
Like maybe similar. Whatever. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, on 21 and 22, DeVries writes that although it is not stated that Hadad did return, we can assume that he became, quote, a troublesome guerrilla fighter, end quote, since he was counted as one of Solomon's foremost adversaries, quote unquote. Fritz writes that the dialogue between Pharaoh and Hadad, quote, describes this opponent as determined and purposeful, end quote.
It's very weird. Like here are some they like quote.
Oh,
Fries.
Beth
It's not
Aven.
like
Okay, that's what it was.
Okay, that's me.
Yeah.
That makes
Oh,
sense.
but yeah. So instead of doing like, here reported speech, they've gone with, I don't know what the word is, like quotations, right? So they've got like Pharaoh says blah blah blah, or I should say Hadad said to Pharaoh blah blah blah. Pharaoh replied, and then he said. So they've chosen to say this is what they said, like, and it just doesn't really make sense as something people would say. Like let me go. No, I don't think that's a good idea. Nevertheless, let me go, and then that's the whole conversation. It's like, okay.
It is a little. I mean,
could have
they
just
didn't even
done
try
reported
to
speech.
create an interesting narrative.
Yeah.
And finally, 23 through 25, we have no other information regarding Rezon. Fritz writes that although he is not attested in other extra-biblical sources as a king of Damascus, he could be identified with King Hezion, mentioned in 1518. Sweeney writes that the root Resh Zain Nun, to be weighty or judicious, may reflect a royal's title, as we see in Judges 5:3 and Habakkuk 1:10 and Psalms 2:2. And DeVries comments, in 2 Samuel 8 verses 3 and through 8, it is stated that David defeated Hadadezer, king of Tsoba, an Aramaic kingdom probably located in the Bika Valley between the Lebanon and anti-Lebanon ranges. Because the Arameans of Damascus tried to help Hadadezer, David defeated them too, took much plunder, exterminated great numbers of troops, and placed a garrison in Damascus. According to the present account, Rezon organized a guerrilla band and eventually recaptured Damascus, where he became king. This kind of sounds familiar. He became Israel's implacable foe during the entire reign of Solomon. Although he could not have mounted
Implacable.
any kind.
Yeah,
English,
implacable.
implacable.
Yeah, it's
Sorry.
Yeah, okay.
Here, I think we have a
Implacable.
problem with
It's stupid.
translation. He formed a guerrilla band, but their first song was "Hey, hey, we're the monkeys."
Ah!
Okay, so he became his. Where was I? Oh, although he could not have mounted any kind of invasion, his attitude foreboded much greater evils destined for future days.
It's interesting though, because God said that because Solomon asked for wisdom and not for long life or wealth or the lives of his foes, he would have peace in his time and long life and great wealth. And now someone's setting up guerrilla warfare and taking over Damascus, which has always been important. It is far from Damascus is kind of so, yeah. I mean, again, God never keeps his word. Seriously, ever.
I want that on a T-shirt with biblical citations for it.
That
Probably be too small to read.
I mean, you'd have to take a selection. There's far too many examples.
Depends on how close you mind strangers coming up to you and going like, what does that say?
Oh, speaking of T-shirts, I have a T-shirt from my atheist convention that I
Ooh.
was on Monday, and it's large. They didn't have any small.
Yeah,
Well,
I gotta
Tom,
say, I envy you for that, because that was the event when I heard the name, when you told me last week, or in email, like when I heard the name, I
Yeah.
realized that was the one that I was supposed to be at.
back in.
I was invited to go to that event, but when that was, it was more than 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Whoever was financing it, or whoever was managing the money, disappeared with it all.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
That's why I've never
about
been
that.
to Israel.
Yeah, I have no
Bummer.
idea about this story, but like other events, like the last one that happened was in 2019, and I was there when I was at the time I was in the army, and then we didn't have any convention for 4 years because of Corona and the war.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
now we have it, and it was a smaller event compared to the other ones, but I enjoyed it as well.
Unfortunately, I live in such a secular country. We don't have atheist conventions.
Uh-huh.
You
Oh,
live
you
in the
poor
UK.
thing.
I've done atheist events in the UK.
I'm sure there are. I've just never heard of anything.
They're not always called atheist events, or they're humanist events in the UK.
Yeah.
And
Free
then there's also
thinkers.
QED in Manchester, which I would love to go back to that one again.
Okay, I think we should continue.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm done with this. Isaac?
Mark, go ahead, take over.
20.
Oh wait, no, we're reading the chapter.
Oh yeah, which verse again? 26.
26 now.
Oh, I'm sorry, that wasn't Mark. Yeah, that's right. This was Isaac. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
All right, so Yaravam, son of Nevat, an Ephraimite of Tseladah, the son of a widow whose name was Zeruiah, was in Solomon's service. He raised his hand against the king. The circumstances under which he raised his hand against the king was as follows. Solomon built the Millo and repaired the breach of the city of his father David. This man, I'll call him Jeroboam from now on, was very capable, and when Solomon saw that the young man or attendant was a productive worker, he appointed him over all the forced labor of the house of Joseph. During the time Jeroboam went out of Jerusalem, and the prophet Ahijah of Shiloh met him on the way. He had put on a new robe, and when the two were alone in the open country, Ahijah took hold of the new robe he was wearing and tore it into 12 pieces. Take 10 pieces, he said to Jeroboam, for thus said the Eternal, the God of Israel, I am about to tear the kingdom out of Solomon's hands, and I will give you 10 tribes. But one tribe shall remain his, for the sake of my servant David, and for the sake of Jerusalem, the city that I have chosen out of all of the tribes of Israel. For they have forsaken me, they have worshipped Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Phoenicians, Chemosh, the god of Moab, and Milcom, the god of the Ammonites. They have not walked in my ways, or done what is pleasing to me, or kept my laws and rules as his father David did. However, I will not take the entire kingdom away from him, but will keep him as ruler as long as he lives, for the sake of my servant David, whom I chose, and who kept my commandments and my laws. But I will take the kingship out of the hands of his son, and give it to you, the 10 tribes. To his son I will give one tribe, so that there may be a lamp for my servant David forever before me in Jerusalem, the city where I have chosen to establish my name. But you have been chosen by me, reign wherever you wish, and you shall be king over Israel. If you heed all that I command you and walk in my ways and do what is right in my sight, keeping my laws and commandments as my servant David did, then I will be with you, and I will build for you a lasting dynasty as I did for David. I hereby give Israel to you. And I will chastise David's descendants for that, though not forever. Solomon sought to put Jeroboam to death, but Jeroboam promptly fled to King Shishak of Egypt, and he remained in Egypt till the death of Solomon. The other events of Solomon's reign and all his actions and his wisdom are recorded in the book of the Annals of Solomon. The length of Solomon's reign in Jerusalem over all Israel was 40 years. Solomon rested with his ancestors and was buried in the city of his father David, and his son Rehoboam succeeded him as king. Rehoboam succeeded him.
Somehow the English pronunciation of the Chavam is not
Rehoboam. Yeah,
Like,
that's the English
yeah,
pronunciation.
That in Hebrew it's like Chavam. I think maybe it follows the Greek. I don't know.
It
Mm,
probably, that would make some sense. There's definitely the addition of a B in there. But yeah, I love this promise to Jeroboam. I will establish, but if you follow in my ways and do what I want, I will establish a reign for you like I did for my servant David, whose kingship I'm tearing down two generations
but not
generations on.
forever.
Yeah.
It's like it's so like it's foreshadowing. You know, the person who wrote this knew what was going to happen next. Like, I'm
definitely.
promising you if you keep my rules, which we know you're not going to, and his son is going to have, his David's descendants will be taken away forever. Sorry, but not forever, because we know that we need to establish the idea of the Messiah being from the house of David and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, and it makes sense in retrospect, knowing that it's copium after the fact. It's just, if you were to take it in that literal sense, I'm going to establish a kingdom for you, just like the guy who I'm breaking a promise to right now by making this arrangement, who just died.
Yeah, and I didn't see Isaac's version, but didn't he say a long lasting?
Yeah, real freaking long. Your
Yeah.
grandson.
Father's son. Here we go.
I will build for you a lasting dynasty as I did for David.
Yeah.
If you heed my commandments. And
started with
blah, blah,
David,
blah.
ended with his son. Got it.
Yeah. Real fucking lasting. God, you know what? Perfect line for that t-shirt.
The line continues.
God never made a promise he didn't break immediately.
Yeah. Again, like Tomer was pointing out, there would be too many citations, both for the promise and the breaking of the promise, to fit on a t-shirt.
You could take a few highlights.
No, it would be a good video, though.
Yeah, it's pretty obvious.
Probably a series.
I like that. I could do that.
You could.
Now that Solomon's reign is over, I mean, apparently there's another whole book of his annals.
I knew you would do something like that.
Isaac, I think we need to get you out more.
He's already out too much.
I'm shoving it down your throats.
Hey.
Not mine.
I don't know why people love that phrase so much. Anyway, yeah. So now that King Solomon's reign is over, we can see that we've got Solomon's reign is kind of one king, two kings, right? Or is it just two kings? So I mean, it's one, two books, whatever it is, but there's it's like two different characters, right? We've got Solomon the Great, the wise, blah blah blah, and then we have the old Solomon, the evil Solomon. It's like what's his name, the king of the Rohirrim in Lord of the Rings. Like,
yes,
he goes through this transformation and becomes this old evil man.
Haven't you heard of Henry VIII? I mean, it's not uncommon.
Okay,
well, Henry VIII was never wise, and
he was actually.
He was apparently he was a good.
He was educated.
When
he was educated then first, and then
he had a head injury before he became king, and apparently he was a nice guy before that, and after that he was a bastard.
Oh.
But yeah, it's definitely with Theoden it was a reverse, and he was under the spell of Saruman.
Yeah, I'm saying like not shown as the part where he becomes old and.
So what you're telling me is that Lord of the Rings is not terribly different than the Bible, except that it's better.
Oh yeah, it's way better.
Way.
But like, think about how many characters we've had like this kind of double profile of. Like the first one that comes to mind for me is Balaam.
Yep.
Sometimes he's good, sometimes he's bad.
Honestly, the duplicity and the taking from multiple sources, I mean, we encountered it all through Genesis. Every single line, we were like, okay, here's two different sources. This one might be three. Joseph, even although I don't know
if Solomon is based off. I don't know if this Solomon is like two different characters amalgamated. I'm seeing it more as, We have this story of King Solomon the wise, blah blah blah. How do we explain the demise of his line?
Yeah.
Right?
So they
had
have
to have
to
done
kind of
something
write that.
to
They have to write that he like made some sort of grave mistake. But
And this is all part of the Deuteronomist historian kind of later redaction, right? Looking back, is that what this is likely the case here?
Well, no, I mean either way, in any case, it would have been. I mean that would make sense if it was like exilic or post-exilic. But also like even for the death of Solomon, they're telling us a source for Solomon's deeds. So it'd have to be like, like Isaac said, annals or something. And is this the first time in this book that
Well,
we're
you could read
getting...
it as the book of the Chronicles of Solomon if you want.
Yeah, they have that a bunch. And they have like the books of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel and Judah.
Yeah. I don't think we've encountered that yet, but
yeah, I think this is like the first one.
Yeah, because we haven't got to the kings of Judah yet.
Right.
Yeah, the Chronicles is or at least what's called Chronicles in the in the Christian Bible version. It seems to be referred to here, but there's also several other sources, and specifically about Solomon. And then of course there's later written sources attributed to Solomon and fun tales about Solomon and his magic and his magical books and grimoires and demon summoning and control.
And his sexual appetite and
hey, threesomes every day.
Yeah.
Hey, with 1,000 wives, a lot is possible. I mean,
I mean,
you could write a midrash about it.
So much source material here for the traditional Christian concept of marriage. One man and as many women that he can afford to keep.
Yeah, that's the biblical way.
As long as they're not foreigners, that's the key, though. Because if they're foreigners, you got a problem.
And as long as they're not making you follow other gods, that's awful. That's horrible.
Or like some translations that say strange women, which I find a little bizarre.
Yeah, God has this warning for you, paleontologists: don't date Ammonites.
Yeah, poor Solomon. He's worried about foreign women only because he hasn't seen K-pop.
What? Okay. Don't listen to him, he's old. So on verse 26, Jeroboam, son of Nebat, according to the Midrash in Talmud Sanhedrin 101b, Nabat is Micah, who was Sheba, son of Bikri. DeVries notes that by stating that Jeroboam was an Ephraimite, he could appropriately serve as boss over a corvée group from the house of Joseph, quote-unquote, according to verse 28, which designated Ephraim and Manasseh. Fritz notes that the mention of his mother is unusual and probably is a sign of her independence after the death of her husband. Cogan writes that Tseruah means a leprous woman, and that it shouldn't be taken as a Jewish perversion, quote-unquote, of an original Zeruiah, or Tseruah, intended to, quote, vilify the rival house of Israel, end quote, according to Gray. His hometown of Zereda is usually identified as En Sereda, near Der Gassane, about 15 miles southwest of Shechem. On 27 and 28, the story of Jeroboam's rebellion is cut by Achia's prophecy. DeVries writes that D.H. has substituted Achia's story and his own comments for what stood in the original account. He suggests that, quote, Jeroboam may have used his position to sidetrack some of Adoniram's harsher commands, thereby establishing himself as hero in the Josephites' eyes, end quote. And Cogan comments, despite the fact that most commentators grant that the prophecy of Achia originated in an older, i.e., pre-Deuteronomistic northern source or prophetic cycle, there is no agreement on the division of the verses between the two, or as many as 4, redactional levels and their original scope. Such detailed source analysis into fragments of verses assigned to sundry hands seems inadvisable when dealing with traditional literature that can grow and develop undetected within the same circles of tradents. Thus, it seems best to speak of the kernel of the Achia prophecy, verses 29 through 31 are all that is left unretouched, and its DH reworking, the two detectable levels within the present text.
That's an interesting point, and I mean, I think valid. There's several things Lawrence pointed out as Deuteronomistic in source, and yet I've pointed out that they also have a value to the post-exilic attitude to the world, which could be why they were preserved, or perhaps just glossed, not in the sense of changed, but in the sense of, brought forward from amongst whatever was preserved or wasn't. So it's hard to, you can't pick it apart to which stitch goes where exactly. And yeah.
On 30 and 31, several commentators compared Achia's act to that of 1 Samuel 15 verses 27 and 28, where Saul tore Samuel's robe. Fritz, for example, writes that the story in 1 Samuel is adapted here for current historical purposes. Sweeney writes that Achia appears as a figure like Samuel, with the symbolic actions of the torn garment recalling the symbolism employed to express Samuel's tearing of the kingdom away from Saul. DeVries, however, notes that in the book of Samuel, the person doing the tearing is the person for whom the symbol is interpreted, i.e. Saul, foreboding ill for him and not good, as here.
Makes sense. I do have a question about that part, right? There seems to be a sort of confusion when it comes to like the number of tribes. We have he tore it into 12 parts, and then he said took away 10, and he's like, you will get one tribe, and he keeps saying like that, that Solomon's son will get one tribe, which
he keeps calling it one tribe, and yet after the fact we'll see that they say with Benjamin also throwing her lot in with Judah. So Benjamin just sort of becomes absorbed into Judah, which is weird because he was also, that's where Saul came from, so you'd think they'd go with the other guy. But yeah.
And it's like, is it when he say the 10 will go away and you will get one, is this prophecy supposed to be saying that there's one left, which is Levi, which is not counted? Or is it was this 12 already without Levi isn't part of the 12 because it's already the 12 includes Ephraim and Manasseh as separate, and therefore what's the 12th one that they're missing? You get 10 and you get one. Is like, I'm giving you one, but we're hinting that another one will follow.
It's a bit weird. It's very, the math does not math. It must be driving Tomer insane.
I got a comment that says from Matt White, who says, Aaron, please rank the following in ease of reading: the Sumerian, the Book of Mormon, Quran, and the Bible. The Sumerian I have never read, so I can't put that on my list. The Book of Mormon,
I haven't read it either, but I would guess
that it's better than all of them. Stupid simple. The Bible, next easiest, even though there's an awful lot of different types of commentary on that. And then the Quran for me was a bear, because I had to read, when I read the Quran, I didn't just read the one in translation that I had. I read a half a dozen others with it, comparing verse to verse, because very often I needed to. And sometimes, even then, I still needed Arabic speaking people who were raised in Islam, who could give me the interpretations that are commonly written into or read into it. Because if you were raised in Punjab, India, and somebody gave you a copy of the Bible, like a Gideon Bible or whatever, out of a hotel room, you would have no idea reading that the serpent was supposed to be Satan. You would have no idea that Jesus was supposed to be his own father. These are just interpretations that are kind of like put into it after the fact in Christian tradition. You're not going to get that from the text itself. I suspected that the Quran would be full of those too, and I was correct about that. So when I did my Quran lessons for the infidel, I had a handful of Arabic speakers who were all explaining to me that, yeah, in the tradition that we were raised in, this actually means that. And so it's not what you would think at all as a Westerner. So the Quran is the hardest one to read because it is written the worst.
Yeah, it is. It is awfully written. It is so disjointed.
It's a wonder. It's a miracle how
Lawrence,
how it's
you are
written.
currently reading the Quran. Let everybody
Yeah.
know about that.
Yeah,
It
we are
sucks.
reading the Quran every Wednesday, and you know what? Honestly, until like it wasn't so bad until we got to the surah that we're currently in. Like I mean, disjointed. It was always disjointed. It's not very well written. But the but Surah 4, the one on women, is fucking awful, morally egregious. It is fucking crazy. They give you a condition under which you can beat your wife, and if she's disobedient, but first you need to verbally reprimand her, and then you need to withhold sex from her, and if those things don't work, then you can beat her. It is like I was like,
Wisdom
are
of
you-
God
Try it,
there.
I fucking
There's-
dare you.
there's no fucking way around, like, because with the Bible, with parts of the Quran, I try to, like, on the show have this what's it called, I try to institute the principle of charity, where I try to give the best possible interpretation for things. Sometimes there's just no way around it. Sometimes things are just awful.
Yeah, I often complained about the Bible. I remember many times in my early career when I would say that the Bible was the most repugnant tome I had ever read. But then I read the Quran. And oh my, is it so much worse. So
It's amazing.
when do you read the Quran? Every Wednesdays?
Yep, every Wednesday, 5 p.m. Central Standard Time.
Thank you. And this is on Milwaukee Atheists.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
And on two of the
Everybody
panel
check
members
that
of
out.
your show are in the chat right now. The Mexican guy said that
Ah,
the
The Mexican guy? Anton
Arabic,
Gomez?
Mexican cat.
yes, he said that the
Okay,
Arabic
what's up,
speaking
man?
guy called Mubarak would say it's a breeze to read the Quran. Yeah.
well, if you've been sort of
Anton and
trained to
Mubarak are both in
hypnotically
chat.
recite it without thinking.
Mubarak is here too.
Oh,
Brilliant. Brilliant. Utmost respect to both of them.
I mean, the more you read these things, that you kind of get acclimatized to like the vibe, and you kind of you don't even notice as you're reading, like, oh yeah, that was just a reference to, you should have genocided that group, and because you left some alive, this is what's gonna happen. Like that's we had that in this chapter, right? It's like, oh, they were supposed to be killing the Edomites, but this one Edomite guy escaped, and now he ended up being a blah blah blah. And it's the subtext is that you should have killed him.
yeah.
I wish you guys could see the environment that I'm sitting in right now.
I
I
saw
have
a
it-
cat.
I have this Argentine boa that has been dropping my microphone by crawling all over it. You can't even see her. But then I have this thing
I can
right
see
here
the
who's
boa.
been loving on me for like an hour. And the boa and the cat actually sniffed each other's faces for a moment. So that was adorable.
Oh, that's so perfect.
Yeah. Y'all continue.
Right, you're in your happy place. I get it. It's. I love it. I
Arn,
love
you
that
have
for you.
you have 3 more comments.
Oh, yes, I do. Anton Gomez says, wait till you get to
Wait.
Surah 65, Lawrence.
Didn't we miss one though?
Yeah, we did.
Oh,
But yeah,
I'm sorry, yes.
I'll wait until Sir 65. Okay, we'll see.
Vorlax
It does.
said, what are the most effective ways to engage with religious individuals and encourage them to critically examine their beliefs? Oh, man, I dare not try
Socratic
to answer that
method.
one.
The Socratic method. It's hard as hell to implement. I can't do it a lot of the time, but if you can, ask questions.
Have you noticed, Lilith, that when you try the Socratic method, believers will not answer a question?
And you have to do the thing you do with a toddler where you remain very calm and detached and you go, okay, but back to the question, and just over and over again, the way that Dawkins did with the fellow who didn't want to admit what the penalty was for leaving Islam.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, that
No.
guy, yeah.
I had someone knocking.
Although we also got through that part in Surah 4 where they're talking about like leaving Islam. You're allowed to leave Islam kind of once. So if you are Muslim and then leave, you're allowed to come back, and it's like it's fine, all is forgiven. But if you leave again after that, then you kill them.
What if you leave once and don't come back?
Then I guess it's fine. At least according
Until the
to
day
the
of
Quran,
judgment.
according to Surah 4 that we
Yeah,
read.
Yeah,
not
they
not in
probably-
real life, but
Sure.
They probably
hypothetically.
interpret it as like someone who leaves like before the age of reason or something like that.
Yeah,
Then you
and
don't-
that's the Quran says that you're going to be, well, in one place it says that you're only going to be punished until on the day of judgment, and then later toward the end it says no, go ahead and punish them now.
Oh, there's a different one, right? Because like there's a difference between the day of judgment, because that's God's punishment, but if you punish them, that's different than God's almighty time-ending punishment.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen things about how the Quran is, because it's written over a period of time, like the theology changes. Like Muhammad
Yeah.
has new ideas as he goes along. Like,
Yeah,
it seems
so-
to be like the earlier surahs, he's not so against the Jews. He thinks he's going to be able to bring them in, and then later on, it's like no.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a
no,
whole
don't make any
apologetic.
treaties.
Yeah,
Like,
abrogation
yeah.
is the
Make-
Just
uh,
reminding you that we need to return.
yeah.
Quite
Oh,
soon.
Yeah, and then Mubarak says it is easy. You just have to believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So on
Yeah,
32.
Lord, Tomir, quit holding us up, man.
Mm-hmm. Always blame the Jew. So on 32, he will have one tribe. The number of torn garments, 12, does not match the number of tribes described here, which is 11. Kimchi and Abravanel wrote that Judea and Benjamin were considered the same tribe. Botseko writes that Benjamin was incorporated into Judah and that there were a small number of Benjaminites, since most of them died during the war regarding the concubine in Gibeah. Likewise, Cogan suggested that the one tribe, quote-unquote, refers to Benjamin, who remained loyal to the house of David and was incorporated into Judah, according to 1221, since it was obvious that Judah would remain with the house of David. Ibn Kaspi wrote that sorry?
So it's I will give you one tribe in addition to the one that already belonged. Like you can't be taken away, I guess.
Yeah.
Because you are Judah. Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
Ibn
Ibn
Kaspi,
Kaspi.
sorry.
Any relation
Yes.
to Tomir?
No. Stop asking me the question. He was born he was born in the 13th century, for fuck's sakes.
You can still be Ibn Kaspi.
Uh-huh.
I mean,
So-
I'm sure Ibn Kaspi is referring to like Kaspi would have been the actual name of his father, right?
Yeah,
Right.
probably.
I'm
Okay,
sure Tomer had many intelligent and renowned ancestors in the 13th century.
Actually, it's not really his father's name. I won't get to that. It's irrelevant. So Ibn Kaspi wrote that it is both appropriate to count 11 tribes, since the tribe of Levi was for Yahweh alone, and to count 12, because Joseph was divided into 2. Likewise, Sweeney suggested that the 12th tribe would likely be Levi, which holds no land of its own. And the Septuagint reads 2 tribes.
Oh.
Or the number is symbolic and nothing inconsistent with reality.
Hmm.
Yeah. I mean, it seems. I mean, if from a skeptical point of view, it seems that the tribe of Simeon has already disappeared like long ago. So, is it part of the 10 tribes or part of Judah? Who knows?
For this bit of the garment being split into 12 pieces or whatever, Cyprian says that Jesus' garments were never split or divided. They casted lots because it was woven together, symbolic of the unity and the kingdom that will come upon with Christ.
The unity of the church, remind me, was it 30 or 40,000 denominations just of Protestantism in the world? I can't quite recall how we were numbering them again.
No, but the one true church is unified.
Oh yeah, they
Right. Right. Okay. Well, That's great. So we'll just set the warring groups from the various branches of the various trees who are all mutually excommunicating each other. Get them to all sit down and decide which is the true church, and then we can talk to them when they're done.
I got another comment. This one from Ronaldo Martinez, offers $2 and says, "I think we have a troll. However, when I go to check the chat, I'm seeing a lot of deleted messages."
We had one. Two actually. And one just came back on the soccer account.
Is one of them the clown of or excuse me, the harlequin of antiquity?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so on 34, ruler. In Hebrew, it's nasi. Cogan notes that the term is, quote, the usual term for the pre-monarchic tribal leadership of Israel in the priestly narration of the Pentateuch and Joshua, and influences Ezekiel's use of the term for Israel's future ruler, end quote. Nasi appears only here in Deuteronomistic literature. He writes that Nasi seems to be the term for the Davidic king preferred in certain pre-exilic circles, as we find in Ezekiel 12:10 and 12, and 21:30 and 34:24. And according to Jacob Liver, perhaps it was an expression of, quote, apposition to absolute kingship, with an undertone of longing for the tribal rule of Israel's early days, end quote. On verse 36, a lamp before me in Jerusalem. Hebrew for lamp is nir, as rendered by Vulgate, Peshitta, and Kimchi. DeVries notes that the promise of a continual lamp to David is found also in 15:4 and 2 Kings 8:19. Septuagint reads, an institution, and Targum, to establish a kingdom. The reading kingdom is accepted by traditionals like Ibn Janach, Ibn Balaam, according to Butzeko, Rashi, and Kara, who take it as an expression of yoke, in Hebrew ol. Likewise, Sweeney writes that the Semitic term nir refers metaphorically to dominion, quote-unquote. Cogan notes that this reading is known from Akkadian niru, in the sense of imposing a governor's authority over his slave. He writes, however, that this negative portrayal does not fit the present context of giving hope to David's lineage. He follows Kimchi's reading of lamp, comparing it to other passages like 2 Samuel 21:17 and Psalms 132:17. On verses 37 through 39, DeVries comments, from verses 31 and 35, one learns that at least nominal authority over 10 tribes is given to Jeroboam, but the climactic appointment of verse 37 declares that he shall in fact rule over only what his soul, Hebrew nephesh, desires, which in any event makes him, and not Solomon's son, king over Israel. Israel, quote-unquote, does not mean here just the 10 tribes, but the same Israel, quote-unquote, over which David and Solomon ruled. D.H. tries to clarify this in verses 32 and 36 by stating that Solomon or his son shall retain rule over one tribe. 12 minus 10 makes 2, and that is the figure that the Septuagint substitutes in both places for the Masoretic text's 1. But the MT faithfully reproduces D.H.'s intent. In his time, Benjamin, the 12th, had long since been absorbed into the nation, hence tribe of Judah. A solid house, in verse 38, echoes 2 Samuel 7:13. Continually excoriating Israel for Jeroboam's sins, D.H. holds this out as a hypothetical promise, conditional on an obedience that in his own time he already knew the northern kings had not fulfilled. On verse 40, the rebellion narrative from verses 27 and 28, which is abruptly cut by Achia's prophecy, continues in verse 40. King Shishak, or Shoshenk in 1425, is generally taken to be Shoshenk I. Cogan writes that Shoshenk was the first of the 23rd Lubian dynasty, ruling circa 945 through 924 BCE. He writes that Shoshenk's acceptance of Jeroboam teaches of a change in Egypt's policy regarding Solomon, as Sayamon, the previous ruler, was Solomon's father-in-law, with Kimchi and Abravanel adding that Shishak did not like Solomon. The length of Jeroboam's stay in Egypt is unknown. Cogan notes Kenneth Kitchen's calculation of 15 years, based on the given data in the Bible, such as Solomon's 40-year reign. He writes, however, that we have no verified data to determine Jeroboam's length of stay in Egypt.
Yeah, Kenneth Christian can shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Wait, was there one subject that he can comment on? I can't remember.
Well,
Egyptology.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So,
Mm.
is that what you quoted him on?
No, according from Cogan.
Whenever he talks about the Bible, he's awful.
Yeah, that's why I mentioned it, because I wanted to piss you off.
Yeah,
So
I
on
know.
verse 40, so on verse 41, the book of the Annals of Solomon. In Hebrew, it's Sefer Divrei Shlomo.
Annals.
The book is generally considered to be a lost work. Cogan notes that out of all the kings, only Solomon had a separate book, probably due to his long and special kingship. He notes Liver's opinion that due to the varied and unusual collection of materials that make up the Solomonic history, with a special emphasis on the king's wisdom, the book was the product of the wisdom circles at the court of Jerusalem. Fritz, however, argued that the reference to the book is fictitious and was used to make the description to appear authentic and based on sources. He writes, quote, "Since Solomon ruled over both parts of the kingdom, D.H. assumes a special source for his history. Such a book of the Acts of Solomon never existed. The author of the pre-Deuteronomistic description of the history of Solomon has probably used authentic source material, but this material is so sparse that one cannot argue for a special collection of events of the Solomonic era."
So I think the reason I think that's unlikely is because, like, if you are just trying to like add like credibility to the things you're writing, it's interesting that it would, because like we have so many references to like the Acts of the Kings of the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel and Judah, right? And I don't know if anyone thinks those are entirely fictional. But like
the Chronicles of what did you say again? Was it
the
the
Chronicles of the Kings of Israel?
Yeah, he takes it also to be fictitious.
Okay, gotcha. I still find that kind of weird because like I guess if you are writing a narrative to be credible, it's shocking how, in comparison, how few times you would cite material. So like, yeah, we get the citations of the Acts of Solomon, but we also get the citations of the kings of Israel and Judah, their chronicles, their annals, but we don't get those citations for like everything else. So I feel like just saying that, oh well, there it's an addition to add credibility is kind of neglecting the fact that they only appear comparatively very few times.
What do we make of the fact that it seems like, I don't know if it's the hello in the Hebrew that makes it into a question. It always seems like whenever these things show up, it is like always asking, like, is this not written? Is this not written?
I mean, you can
Why?
read it. I mean, I read it. Halohem ketuvim. I mean, you could read it as aren't they? Of course they are written in, or like something like that. Like,
Are they not written?
yeah,
Like,
Halohem
like-
are. Yeah, it's a bit odd, but I don't. But I think it can also like be read. Of course they are written, or something like that. I mean,
That seems to suggest a bit of ambiguity. Like maybe we're not so sure. Is it not the case? I don't know.
Yeah,
I
in
think
English,
it's more like,
definitely-
isn't it obvious? Like you've seen it before. Like, is it not written in the book? You don't.
yeah,
need to go-
it's all.
Yeah.
Yeah. This kind of description also appears in the book of Jasher, if I remember, in
Yeah,
the David's Lament. Are they not written in the book of the upright?
I mean, the JPS just translates it as are recorded in the books of the Annals
Yeah,
of
but-
Solomon. Like they don't.
Yeah, I see many commentators write, are they not written in the books of the Acts of Solomon?
Yeah.
Just so they put it as a
More
question.
literal, yeah.
And finally, on verse 42, about 40 years. Solomon ruled the exact number of years as David did. DeVries writes that this may be schematic and hence not to be taken literally, a fact of which biblical chronologists have taken insufficient account. And now for the Christians. I only have two. Augustine, twice. So Augustine wrote that Solomon allowed his wives to practice idolatry instead of opposing them. No, sorry, that's somebody else. That is not. It's irrelevant. Sorry. Where was it?
Yeah, I was gonna say that doesn't sound like a Christian interpretation.
No,
It
yeah.
sounds bizarre enough.
Here. Solomon obtained wisdom through spiritual love, but lost it through carnal love.
Yeah, that sounds more Christian.
Yeah.
What? So notice how in the text it uses the metaphor of the heart, which I know that in contemporary times this is like the seat of emotion, but this was not the seat of emotion. This was more of the mind, correct?
I mean, they didn't
Yeah,
necessarily
they
know
all
about the
thought that
brain in
thought
the
came
same
from
way
heart,
that.
yeah. That's from the heart, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So it's more like he was just convinced, like, not that he was persuaded emotionally, as one might read today. Or how do we?
And again, Augustine wrote that this Solomon's apostasy and idolatry teaches us that no hope must be placed in any human being.
Yeah, believers love that shit. So like whenever like if you and I, if any one of us here were to mention like the work that scientists have put in, they'd be like, but they're human. Like, yeah, literally like everything you've ever read is written by humans. Like they don't
No, it's
acknowledge
not.
that. It's not. Okay.
God wrote the Bible.
Of course, yes. So yeah, the Bible, the Quran, yeah, they just go in with the assumption that it's all by God, and it's
God is a terrible author. Terrible.
agreed.
Boo.
Mm.
I'm hearing an echo of my voice.
Yeah, I think we should continue. To the next chapter.
Yes, and Arn, you are muted.
And here I was telling her that the reason she was hearing an echo of her voice is because she is godlike.
Well, thank you. It's always nice to be recognized.
So, 1 Kings times 12.
Yeah,
So we have
read
12
up.
Kings.
Read up to 25.
All right, hold
No,
on.
sorry,
let me
24.
put
24.
This boa away. Will you let go of that? Let go. Okay. There we go. Good girl.
Is the snake engulfing something?
Rehoboam went to Shechem, for all Israel had come to Shechem to make him king. When Jeroboam, son of Nebat, heard of it, for he was still in Egypt, where he had fled from King Solomon. Then Jeroboam remained in Egypt, and they sent and called him. And Jeroboam and Jeroboam and all the assembly of Israel came and said to Rehoboam, your father made your yoke heavy. Now, therefore, lighten the hard service of your father and his heavy yoke that he placed upon us, and we will serve you. He said to them, go away for 3 days, then come back again to me. So the people went away. I'm sure confused a little bit. Then King Rehoboam took counsel with the older men who had attended his father Solomon while he was still alive, because it didn't do much good after he was dead, saying, how do you advise me to answer this people? They answered him, if you will be a servant to this people today and serve them and speak good words to them, then you answer them. Then when you answer them, they will be your servants forever. But he disregarded the advice that the older men gave him and consulted with the young men who had grown up with him and now attended him. He said to them, what do you advise that we answer this people who have said to me, lighten the yoke that your father has put on us? The young men who had grown up with him said to him, Thus you should say to this people who spoke to you, your father made our yoke heavy, but you must lighten this for us. Thus you should say to them, my little finger is thicker than my father's loins.
I actually
Now-
like that. And
Hold on,
if
do
you
mean
think and if
little
you think
finger or
something,
middle finger,
I mean, if yes, we'll get to that.
okay, I was hoping
We
so.
all know what he means by loins.
Yes.
For
Now,
some reason, Steinfeld says his waist, but whatever.
uh-huh.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I don't.
No.
Which would be very, very big.
I think we're going from pork loins to pork sausage here. Now, whereas my father laid on you a heavy yoke, I will add to your yoke. My father disciplined you with whips, but I will discipline you with scorpions.
The more you tighten your grip, Tarth, the more star systems will slip through your fingers.
So Jeroboam and all the people came to Rehoboam. Jeroboam and Rehoboam. I'm getting a Tweedledee, Twiddledum kind of vibe.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. Yeah.
Yep.
Came to Rehoboam on the third day, and the king said, as the king had said, come to me on the third day. The king answered the people harshly. He disregarded the advice that the older men had given him and spoke to them according to the advice of the young men. Because why would you look at peer-reviewed articles when you can just go to a fucking podcast?
Well, yeah, I mean, these are the dude bros that grew up in privilege with him, and they would know what you need to do to handle these poor people who are doing all the actual work.
My father made your yoke heavy, but I will add to your yoke. My father disciplined you with whips, but I will discipline you with scorpions. So the king did not listen to the people, because it was a turn of affairs brought about by the Lord to fulfill his word that the Lord had spoken by Ahijah the Shilonite to Jeroboam, son of Nebat. I have no idea what I just said.
Basically,
It's
Yahweh did
like
all of it.
It's a parenthesis saying this is why did this happen, because God wanted it to happen.
Because as Nash pointed out earlier, we read this book every week and we come to the same conclusion. God is a dick.
Yeah. Why did my child die of leukemia? God wanted him to. When all Israel saw the king would not listen to them, the people answered the king, what share do we have in David? We have no inheritance, the son of Jesse. To your tents, O Israel, look now to your own house, O David. So Israel went away to their tents. But Rehoboam reigned over the Israelites who were living in the towns of Judah. When King Rehoboam sent Adoram, who was the taskmaster over the forced labor,
Yeah.
biblical morality.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know slavery is not really a thing in the Old Testament. It's not, it's not like what they had in America. It's just forced labor at the end of a whip.
It's slavery light. They haven't paid for the full upgrade yet.
Yeah. All Israel stoned him to death.
Yeah.
King Rehoboam then hurriedly mounted his chariot to flee to Jerusalem. The king has to flee. So Israel has been in rebellion against the house of David to this day.
It reminds me of so many things going on in the world, so many things, because it's always the same story. A ruling class has power and is meant to create stability, and at first it does, and stability is good for everyone. But then they get a little more power, and then they get a little more, and then they want a little more, and then they forget that they might actually have any responsibility in this system, and then people start to push back, and then eventually they just say, screw you all, we're going to choke the life out of you if you try and have any power or autonomy at all. And then someone snipes a CEO in the middle of New York. Oh no.
Yep, gotcha. When all Israel heard that Jeroboam had returned, they sent and called him to the assembly and made him king over all Israel. There was no one who followed the house of David except the tribe of Judah alone, because God promised. Well, never mind. We just won't talk about what God promised. When Jeroboam came to Jerusalem, he assembled all the house of Judah and the tribe of Benjamin, 180,000 chosen troops to fight against the house of Israel. God's chosen people fighting against God's chosen people, because nobody's smart enough to recognize a fucking pattern. Sorry.
Tradition.
Tradition. Did I finish that line? Restore the king of Rehoboam and Sodom. Okay. But the word of God came to Shemaiah, the man of God. The man of God. There's one. All of Israel gets one man of God. Say to King Rehoboam of Judah, son of Solomon, and all of the house of Judah and of Benjamin, and to the rest of the people, thus says the Lord, thou shalt not go up or fight against your kindred, the people of Israel. Let everyone go home, for this thing is from me. So they heeded the word of the Lord and went home again, according to the word of the Lord.
Yeah.
Is that where you wanted me to stop?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm
So
sorry.
pretty
This has never
spicy.
happened. Did God just stop people from killing each other by just telling them to go home? And this has never happened before in this book so far.
Yeah, I'm impressed too.
Mm-hmm.
Did God take some anger management courses or something?
God
I mean,
just came up and said, never mind, I'm going to be completely uncharacteristic with me.
Well, I mean, if you just reading it literally, it just says that Shemaiah, the agent of God, said that God said this. It's not like the narrator saying that God said this. So
Yeah,
he
fair
could be
enough.
making it up.
Well, people have done good in the name of God and used the name of God and the idea of God to convince people to do good occasionally too. Not nearly enough, but it's happened.
You know,
Mhm.
knowing what happens next, this is a very weird section, because like you
Mhm.
have Rehoboam being an asshole, and then fleeing to Jerusalem, where he is about to ready this army. And God says, like, no, stop that, calm down. But then Jeroboam is going to do something that that pisses God off like a shit ton.
Mm-hmm.
Like Rehoboam is not, like, he is seen as a bad guy, but he also isn't, because by not going up against Jeroboam, or by being told by God not to go up against Jeroboam, he's kind of like God is like leaving Jeroboam for himself in a way.
Hmm. Yeah, I can see what you mean. He's setting him up. Although, honestly, to me, it would just seem like Rehoboam is massively outgunned in terms of troops and just said, I can't go fight. God told me not to, which was probably a smart decision, but definitely would not have been seen as a courageous or kingly one. So it's always good if you have someone to blame. I can't. God said, go home and play with my toys.
Okay, so I'll start on the first one about Shechem. We would have expected the coronation to occur in Jerusalem. Kimchi suggested that the Israelites already knew of Achia's prophecy to Jeroboam, and they were just looking for a reason to pass the kingship to Jeroboam. Sweeney notes that Shechem was an early political center of Israel. Joseph's bones were buried here, as we see in Genesis 50:25 and 26, and Exodus 30:19, and Joshua 24:32. Deuteronomy 27 portrays Israel's ratification of the covenant at the site of Shechem, and Joshua 24 portrays it as the site of the renewal of the covenant at the end of Joshua's lifetime. He writes that the assembly of northern Israel at Shechem, to confirm Rehoboam's kingship, marks a return to the ancient political center, following years of political stability under the reigns of David and Solomon. Likewise, DeVries writes that the present passage is the most important evidence that Shechem remained a central point of assembly for the former tribal league. It was deactivated at the death of Solomon and demanded recognition of the ancient right to approve, if not to choose, a new king.
Much in the old Scottish way. You would vote for the next king. You wouldn't just give it to the Nepo baby.
Now on verse on verse 2, he returned from Egypt. The Masoretic text reads, and Jeroboam settled Vayeshev in Egypt. Although this reading is found in the Targum and Peshitta, it doesn't fit verse 3, which says that Jeroboam went to Shechem. 2 Chronicles 10:2 reads, and Jeroboam returned Vayeshav from Egypt, Mimitzrayim, which is more appropriate. Cogan, however, writes that there is still tension between verses 3, 12, and 20, which seem to imply a later return. He suggested that Jeroboam's name was added to verse 3 at a later stage. According to the Septuagint, Jeroboam returned home to Tzerera, where he remains until he is called to the assembly in verse 20. On verse On verse 4, Fritz comments, these verses mention the forced labor as the main reason for the breaking away of the northern tribes from the Davidic dynasty. The duty to do work for the king was probably introduced at the same time as the kingship itself, but only during the massive building projects of Solomon did the forced labor amount to an unbearable load, as we see in 9 verses 15 through 25. The sockage is the reason for the split of the northern tribes from the Davidic dynasty, since Rehoboam refuses to ease the load. However, the remark in verse 16 shows that the cause for the dissolution of the united monarchy was rooted in the fundamental discrepancy between north and south. On verse 6, the elders. Cogan notes Malamat's opinion that the elders were an advisory council, quote-unquote, with roots reaching back to the pre-monarchic period, who were patriarchal notables, quote-unquote. However, Cogan rejects this view, since there is no evidence for such an institutional body of elders at Solomon's court. Instead, the elders are in parallel to the young men in verse 8, both terms deriving from wisdom literature. According to Knox, these were unofficial advisors who had experience, such that the king might advise with them. Likewise, DeVries renders the veterans to represent their actual functions. Josephus in Antiquities 8:215 has the elders as Solomon's friends.
It very much puts me in mind of the issues with Moses when he was leading the people, because there are two different ways it plays out. At one point, someone says, hey, you shouldn't have all the power. God also speaks to others, and then God kills them all and has a temper tantrum. But Moses' father-in-law says, hey, maybe you want to share the load a little bit. There's a lot of people here. You got a lot to handle. Maybe delegate. And then you get the whole 70 elders thing and the breakdowns and all that jazz. So there does seem to be some precedent to the idea of elders. But yeah, the wisdom literature makes more sense in terms of the wise old men and the young, impulsive, selfish men being sort of a counterpoint.
Yeah, and their advice is logical because Solomon had all of these massive building projects and stuff. He needed the workforce more than Rehoboam would need. So
yeah. And if you come in on a soft sell and are the nice guy after everybody's had to work too hard and you give everyone a holiday, then they like you more.
Yeah, they give a reasoning.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, on verse 7, if today you will be a servant to these people. Kimchi writes, you shall submit to them and answer to them as they please, quote, end quote. And Ibn Kaspi writes, quote, it does not mean that you shall wash their feet or take their sandals off, but that you shall speak to them good things by way of humility and humbleness, end quote. And Sweeney comments, The elders' statements are revealing insofar as they correctly recognize Rehoboam's weak position. Lacking sufficient power to subdue the northern tribes, Rehoboam will have to convince the northerners that it is in their best interests to serve him. The advice that he present himself as a servant to them would hardly provide a lasting basis for his rule. He would become a very weak ruler, and power within the coalition would clearly shift to the north. Such a response would allow Rehoboam time to consolidate his position, and perhaps to turn key elements of the northern tribes into his supporters.
So play politics. They
Yeah.
advised him to play politics rather than just come in and crush them and.
Yeah.
Arr.
Okay, on verse 8, the young men who had grown up with him. Hebrew for young men is yeladim, which renders as children or boys. This label seems strange given that Rehoboam was 41 at the time of his coronation. Cogan writes that the word children indicates the essence of the rivalry between them and the more experienced elders. Likewise, DeVries renders the newcomers. On verse 10, my little finger is thicker than my father's waist. Hebrew for little finger is kotoni. Although this reading is found in most early translations, Josephus in Antiquities 8-217, and most traditionals, Kimchi and Botseko take it to be the penis, in Hebrew eivar. This reading is favored by Sweeney, who writes that the reference highlights the immaturity of Rehoboam's friends and could only be understood by the Israelites as a display of contempt. Fritz takes a similar approach, but writes that the father's loins, quote-unquote, are, quote, a euphemistic circumscription for the penis, which manifests the might of the loins, end quote. He writes that the comparison opposes the little finger of the hand with the penis of the father, and thus taunts him, and that it emphasizes the superiority of the speaker, while putting down the self-esteem of the addressee. And Targum reads... Yeah.
They really have to explain in a scholarly way dick jokes.
Yes.
Ugh.
Yes.
We were
I mean-
discussing this last week before the show, Lawrence and I, how like the small dick jokes.
It's funny that
literally...
they had to say that it was a euphemistic. They couldn't say it was a euphemism. We would have known. But they said it was a euphemistic circumscription.
Yes.
Mhm.
Which,
Well, they have to
if they,
add
Another
words.
if they
joke.
weren't Jewish, it would just be euphemistic. But since they are Jewish, then it's a euphemistic circumscript. Oh wait, no, wait, that's circumcision.
No.
Sorry.
Good. Yeah, bad.
Yeah,
Absolutely
let's-
the power
let's-
dynamics of the time, you know? Like, we were talking about this like, with Francesca Stavropoulos and the whole thing with the, you know, my God has a bigger dick than your God. Literally. They carve giant phallic things and stick them up everywhere because, you know, real mature, Bradley.
So Alexander, I don't know how to pronounce this. I have no idea what
Dalich?
that letter is. Tomer, you probably know because you know everything.
Maybe Dalich? Or
But that's
Dalich, I
not
don't
pronounced
know.
as a D, is it?
It might be
Uh,
like Valich.
Oh
which,
yeah.
Well, if
But
it was
I
something
don't-
Icelandic, I would
I
get
don't
that.
recognize what language
It's
that is.
Serbian.
Serbian.
Oh.
Okay. I have no idea. So I'm going to go with whatever Tomer says. Alexander Dalek?
Dalich.
offers- Dalich?
Dalich.
Thank
Dalich,
you.
or yeah.
How do you know this much?
I don't. I guess. Is that-
And here I am just bearing. What the hell?
Oh no, it's Ja. It's Ja. So it's
Oh.
Jalich.
Jalic?
Jalish.
Jalic.
Yeah.
Alexander
Yes.
Jalic. I just want to say that I think someone should make a compilation of Aaron's impressions of apologists. It's priceless. Greetings from Serbia.
Agreed.
Thank you so much for that. Ben One Eye Ron. Offers $25.
Oh
Thank
no,
you.
no, it's 25 Romanian lei.
Oh, it's
the
It's Ben One Eye, and he's offered. What is the currency, Tomer?
Romanian lei.
Romanian lei. Thank you. Why did Israel have? Why did Israel have a sense of humor? Because they all got the yoke.
That's the worst yoke I've heard today.
Yeah. Yeah, I hope it's the record holder for the remainder of the day.
Mhm.
I need a rolled up newspaper.
Bad.
No. Bad.
Oh, and toggle regarding my little finger is thicker than my father's loins. It reads, "My weakness is stronger than the strength of my father." Whatever that
No.
means.
No. The dick joke is better.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't see it as being my dick is bigger than his dick, or my dick is bigger than his waist, because he wouldn't use the word "my small thing" to refer, and then say "my small thing, my dick is bigger," right? You wouldn't use a phrase "my small thing," right? It makes sense. My little finger, like the name of the little finger.
Well,
is
you're
the
saying his
little
dick
finger,
is
the little one.
small.
Well, but the next thing is thicker. It's bigger, right? Why would you use
It's
an
thicker
expression
than
that
your
means
big
small?
thing. Yeah, it's a dick joke. We all know.
If it was a
it's dick
nickname
joke.
for penis, you wouldn't use a word like "my small thing." Like, I mean, people say things like "Little Johnson," maybe, but
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, but
Generally, people don't like
large
using the word
penis.
"small" to refer to it.
I love
Makes sense.
names for penises that are
Yeah, little
actually
buddy, that's good.
names,
Yeah.
like Johnson and John Thomas. Okay, Matt White says, Aaron, circumcising the phallus would be giving a tattoo on the
Circumscribing.
foreskin rather than a cut.
Circumscribing.
Oh, circumscribing.
Circumscribing. I didn't read
Yeah.
that right. I messed up the joke. I'm sorry. I didn't realize it. My apologies.
I have a whip around here somewhere.
Okay,
It's an outline of the corona. Too much. Sorry.
Okay, so on verse 11, I will scourge you with scorpions. Or scourge you with scorpions, yeah. Hebrew for scorpions is akrabim. The reading scorpions is attested in the Septuagint, Vulgate, and Josephus in Antiquities 8:217. Likewise, Fritz writes that to discipline you with scorpions, quote unquote, is a metaphor for intensification, since the sting of a scorpion is very painful. Targum renders whips and Peshitta scourges. Most traditional commentators take akrabim to be a type of whip which stings like a scorpion, according to Rashi, or have thorns which penetrate and are painful, according to Gersonides.
I forgot to mention my daughter-in-law just doesn't have spiders. Doesn't just have spiders. She has a bunch of scorpions too.
So she likes arachnids in general? Or...
Yes, apparently. But only the deadly ones. The tarantulas that she has 2 tarantulas, and they're both listed as the deadliest of all tarantulas.
You know, under normal circumstances, I would say gross, but given where you live, this sounds like a very sensible investment for a young woman.
I haven't finished my commentary.
No one messed with Aaron. I mean, you have every bit to lose if you mess with that household.
And Cogan notes the Akkadian thorny whip, kinaz saktum, and barbs likened to the sting of a scorpion. And Botseko renders vermin.
I think the reason why they went with maybe it's a type of whip and stuff is because the verb isn't like to, what did you say? To afflict you. I think it's a verb that normally means to whip, to flog. So to flog you with scorpions is quite funny.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it wouldn't make a lot of sense with real scorpions, but
yeah.
No, Rehoboam is just being kinky. We know.
What would I know about it? On verse 15, Sweeney comments, verse 15 explains the reason for Rehoboam's ill-considered response as divine intervention. That is, Yahweh had caused a sibah, literally a turning of events, so that Rehoboam would follow the advice of his comrades and confirm Achia's prophetic word concerning Jeroboam's kingship. 1 Kings 11, verses 26 through 40. Such a statement is particularly controversial because it indicates divine intervention to ensure the downfall of an otherwise innocent man. Some might understand it as reference to absolute divine power and freedom, but it points to Yahweh as a trickster who works to undermine the human protagonists. Compare 1 Kings 22. Such a statement raises once again the question of Yahweh's fidelity to the covenant with David. Yahweh's action might be justified in relation to Solomon on account of his apostasy, as we see in 1 Kings 11, 1-13, but this is a case of the sins of the father visited on the son. Compare Deuteronomy 5, 9, and 10, Exodus 20, 5 and 6, contra Ezekiel 18, and Jeremiah 31, 29 and 30. Rehoboam has done nothing to justify divine punishment.
No, it's, I mean, yeah, we've already sort of touched on this. God is very two-faced and backhanded and manipulative and just a dick all around. But I do love the idea that someone wrote down that it took an intervention from God for a Nepo baby raised in super privilege to be a selfish, out of touch douchebag. You know, not like that would ever happen naturally.
On verse 16, Fritz notes that a similar form of the proverb appears in the unifying motto during Sheba's rebellion, where it serves as the succinct formula for the northern tribes in opposition to the Davidic dynasty. He writes that the circumstances of the northern tribes differ. There is no kingship tied to David and his house, and thus the northern tribes are not obliged to be loyal and faithful to the Davidic monarchy. He further writes, quote, "The cry to your tents, O Israel, probably takes up an old formula that was used to release the army from their camp to return back home. The last statement, 'Look now at your own house, O David,' is even more explicit. From now on, the Davidic dynasty is limited to Judah. The whole proverb assumes that a tendency to move away from the Davidic dynasty existed among the northern tribes from very early on during the monarchic period. The narrator uses an older proverb to shape his material. The foolish behavior of Rehoboam is made to trigger a development already in progress. The northern tribes were not rooted in the united monarchy, despite the long reign of David and Solomon. Thus, they used the change from one king to another to realize their long-desired independence. By using the proverb in verse 16, the narrator incorporates the element of a general existing tension between north and south into his description of the events.
Okay, Lawrence, let me know what are the chances that there ever was a united monarchy in real life?
Well, I mean, you can't really call it reunited if it was never united, right?
Well, yeah, but that's
the
story.
Right, yeah. So there definitely wasn't a united monarchy under David and Solomon. But I would say that by the time of Josiah, I think it would be likely that there was some unity.
Oh, because of the Israelite refugees coming down from the Assyrian invasion?
Yeah. So like
Okay,
by that time they would have been united, which is why the Deuteronomistic history has so much stuff about them being together. Like, oh, look at this, we belong together, guys.
Yeah, we were always buddies, always family,
Yeah.
always. I swear, it's because I've always found that once I learned a bit more about the history, the actual history, that this was just completely made up. That the North and South developed entirely. I mean, not independent; they were neighbors, but they were their own kingdoms. And then it was only once Assyria took over the Northern Kingdom because they had way more stuff and were worth going after, that this retcon became a popular way to harmonize peoples who had some friction.
Yeah, I want to say that I get frustrated when I do the taxonomy videos that I do, because I've got like a cult following on those. My patrons certainly enjoy those, and those are the ones that I most like to do. But they require so much work, both in the research, the composition, finding all the images and everything, especially if there's video involved. And sometimes I'll have to upload the same thing over and over again to get over copyright things. And there's an awful lot of work involved in that. But I'm happy to do it. I'm equally proud of this show, even though it doesn't get near the views. I mean, my taxonomy videos, for all the work that I do, that I don't get a lot of views on them. Sad to say.
Yeah, I
because
feel that.
people only want drama. They only want train wrecks.
Yep.
They're
I know.
amazing. They're
Yeah,
amazing
but
videos.
I very much enjoy the show that we have. I mean, I admire all of you guys for putting in what you do to it. I think there's value to this. And even though there's not a whole lot of, common masses that would agree with that, I mean, I think this is one of the best things that we do, and I'm delighted that we have you guys doing this. And I hugely appreciate it. But somebody in the chat said, "Well, this is a tad boring." It's a Bible study. It's supposed to be boring. But
No, here's the
Frankly,
thing.
this is the least boring I've ever been to among Bible studies.
exactly. Go find any other fucking Bible story. This is the best one.
Well, actually, no. The best one was Atheist Sunday School.
Okay. All I know of that one was when you gave me too much rum and put me on camera.
Yeah. And the thing is, he remembers that one. He doesn't remember the other 2 times.
No, I don't remember that one.
You remember things adjacent to that one. You have a concept of a memory.
I did watch it, but as Lawrence himself will admit, I mean, I did watch a few episodes of what he did, but as he himself will admit, his scholarship at that time was not what it is today. I mean, I'm embarrassed when I look at stuff that I did 15 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm delighted that he has matured as much as he has, and that he's gotten to the degree that he has now, and that we have Lilith and Mark and Isaac. Your perspectives combined, fucking brilliant. I'm so proud of this show. There you go.
Thank you.
Nothing
Aaron.
allowed.
Tomer is always bringing all this commentary, which is great because I don't have access to all the Jewish midrashes and all that stuff. It's
Somebody
not in
says
my
I went
library.
back and watched that one later. No, I know better than that shit.
Well, when we get to Chronicles, I'll probably have to buy a physical book of traditionals, and some of them are obscure.
Tomer, that's an
Internet
interesting
Archive.
thing. But when we get to the New Testament, I have to wonder how Tomer's performance is going to change.
I have no idea.
It's more Book of Mormon style, probably.
Maybe. maybe.
I'm
I have no
gonna
idea.
by the time we get to the New Testament, I'm going to have I'm gonna have a lot of stuff prepared for it, because I haven't decided exactly how I want to approach it, but I know I want to first talk about the formation of the New Testament itself. I want to talk about the once we start it, right, we're starting the gospel, so I'm not going to concentrate too much on the letters or anything, but I want to talk about the synoptic problem as well. Hopefully by that time I'll have a video on it, so it'll just be easier. But I also want to, because I have a Greek New Testament right there, and I have textual commentaries on the Greek of the New Testament on most preferred readings and why.
I have some questions about whether we want to start them in more or less chronological order by reading Mark first, despite the fact that the Bible isn't constructed that way, or comparative readings for portions. Yeah.
So I also have a synopsis of the Gospels. I tried to get the synopsis in, which is outlining the stories side by side. So I do have a synopsis, but unfortunately it's in English. I tried to get the Greek version, but they sent me the English version, and I left a 1-star review.
I have a diglot with both Greek and English.
Oh, see, that would be nice too.
You are. I understand, Lawrence, that you're starting into, hasn't started yet, but you're about to begin your last semester.
Right, last semester for undergrad. Yeah. But
for undergrad, so that you will actually have some letters stapled to the back of your name after this.
Yeah. So degrees in religious studies, classics, and a minor in Greek language.
I cannot express how proud I am of you.
Just don't. This is sucked. I have learned far more outside of school than I ever have learned in school.
But I did too.
Right. Yeah.
I completely know where you're coming from. But it's still, I'm just going to let it go.
Next semester is also going to be probably my final semester, and I'll be Master Tomer then.
Master
There's the tiniest possibility I might be able to attend Lawrence's graduation. Tomer's.
That is a significantly longer flight.
Who said I am attending graduation?
Sir, you will not take this from us.
Listen, I hate every single person that I talk to. Why would I want to be in a room with a bunch of people that I don't like?
So that we can make a drinking game out of the video afterwards. With you.
Hey, but Tomer,
I think we need
you can't expect to be called a master unless you do the same to others. So from now on, I do expect you to call me master.
No.
Ooh,
so on verse I guess.
Wait, where's my crop?
It's only for a period of time, though. Okay, I think we should come back to the text.
Yeah.
So I'm on verse 17.
Okay, but you have to wear Jedi robes when we call you master.
I don't have those. So on verse 17, Cogan writes that this note is not supported by other information. It is unknown regarding the settlements of northern Israelites south of the land. He suggests that verse 17 is a later gloss intended to explain Benjamin joining Judah in the war which Rehoboam made against Jeroboam. Sweeney writes that the use of the participle hayoshvim, those who were dwelling, suggests a continuing situation that persisted through the time of the writer of this narrative, either in the time of Hezekiah or Josiah.
I got a comment here from Vorlax, who says, Aaron, I saw your interview with Jesse Lee Peterson. How did you feel during and after that experience? I was a little dizzy because that man was the single stupidest person I've ever spoken to in my life. And I live in Texas.
When Jesse Lee Peterson spoke to Ray Comfort, who is an exceptionally stupid individual, I saw on Ray's face for the first time the look that everyone else gets when they're talking to Ray Comfort. The look that says, am I being punked? It is not possible for a person to be this stupid and still be able to button up their pants.
Yeah.
What is happening?
That man was profoundly fucking dumb.
Okay.
All you gotta do is look at the banana, how it's shaped to fit perfectly in the hand.
Verse 17.
I finished verse 17. Yeah.
I thought you said you had to do verse 17. Okay.
No, now I'm on 18.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay, so Adoram. Septuagint.
Master Tomer here.
I'm still not master. Just be patient. I'm a masterant, not the master.
A masterette?
A master not. A masterant. You know, somebody who studies for. Never mind. Master not. It's master not.
But you're not gonna be a master. You're gonna be a mathster.
Shut up.
Sorry. 18.
Sorry. Yeah, 18. Whew. Now, regarding Adoram. Septuagint, the Lusanic recension, several traditionals like Rashi and Kara, and modern commentators identify Adoram as Adoniram of 1 Kings 4:6. Fritz writes that the mention of Adoram shows the lack of historical reliability, since according to 2 Samuel 20:24, he already belonged to the officials of David, and was then the overseer of the forced labor under Solomon. He writes that it is hardly unlikely that Adoram continued to occupy this office under Rehoboam, and it is more likely that the pre-Deuteronomistic author used names known from tradition. Sweeney writes that the people's reaction against Adoram, quote, demonstrates Rehoboam's egregious miscalculation, end quote.
Rashi says that it's Adoniram, and here is an old man. Maybe he was a bit respected in his time, but even though, they've gone and killed him, like that.
Yeah.
One time stoning is used in an appropriate way, I guess.
Now on 19, Fritz writes that verse 19 summarizes the event from the Judaic perspective. Sweeney writes that the notice "until this day" indicates that this narrative dates to the reign of Hezekiah, since northern Israel did not exist following its destruction by the Assyrians in 722 or 721 BCE. Cogan, however, writes that while Israel did not exist during DH's time, even after the exile, DH expected its return. On verse 20, only the tribe of Judah remained loyal to the house of David. This claim is contradicted by verses 21 through 24, which tell that Benjamin also joined Rehoboam. Although the Septuagint adds Benjamin to this verse, it also contradicts that it was only, in Hebrew, Zulati, that it was only Judah that remained. Kimchi wrote that Benjamin was a part of Judah, since Jerusalem was between the two tribes, and whoever ruled Jerusalem ruled both. And Cogan writes, the joining of Benjamin with Judah and the house of David is never explained in Kings. Benjamin's desertion of the northern cause is even more puzzling when it is remembered that Saul was a Benjaminite and that Sheba, son of Bichri, a Benjaminite, had led a rebellion against David, 2 Samuel 20 verses 1 through 22. Most historians have argued that, because of the proximity of Jerusalem to the Benjaminite border, it was necessary for Judah's kings to occupy Benjaminite territory as a security buffer against attacks on the capital city. In the long run, this situation may have been interpreted as Benjamin's having linked its fortunes with Judah from the start. On verse 21, 180,000 able young men. This number, attested also by Josephus in Antiquities 8:222 and most early translations, is an incredible number. Sweeney notes that this number corresponds to the total number of men employed in the corvée in 1 Kings 5:27 through 29. Cogan notes that this number indicates the story's lateness in the script of Chronicles. Septuagint and the Lusanic Recension read 120,000, which is still large, and DeVries takes it to be, quote, schematic and may not be factually accurate.
Yeah, well, there's not a lot here that could reasonably be said to be factually accurate.
I love that a Bible scholar says, yeah, this may not be factually accurate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Nor
mean,
does the archaeology support like fortifications and buildings that would be able to manage this amount of people either.
no, it's and you know, a lot of this is sourced from court propaganda, and court propaganda exaggerates numbers. Look at us, we're the biggest and the best and emperors of the universe, and you were really just this tiny little, you know, pimple between two larger, more powerful neighbors. It's, you know, we accept it in every other point in history that every other tiny nation is going to make a big deal out of themselves, and yet we're supposed to take it all literally here, at least if you're raised in certain churches.
On 22, Shemaiah. Shemaiah appears only here in Kings. He is mentioned again in 2 Chronicles 12:5, where he preaches following God's word. He is called here a man of God, quote unquote, which DeVries takes to mean, quote, a charismatically endowed person, at least potentially a prophet, end quote. Fritz writes that it is hardly possible to secure the historicity of Shemaiah. He writes, quote, just as in the edition in 11, 29, and 30, the course of history is seen as the will of God, who nevertheless remains hidden. King and people just carry out the divine counsel, end quote.
Something about that name Shemaiah is that in the Hebrew is El Shemaiah, the man of Elohim or the man of God. Why do modern English translations omit the L in there? Do you guys know?
No, it's not L.
Is that the subject marker
yeah,
instead? That's
to
not L.
Shemaiah. That was the word of God to Shemaiah.
Yeah,
Never mind.
too. It's like it's just a longer version of la of the prefix. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I also kind of wonder if he's the same one that's going to appear in chapter 13. I know it doesn't say his name in chapter 13, but I wonder if there were people that
I think
believe that he was the same.
traditionals. I think traditionals take him to be Shemaiah.
Makes sense.
No, I can remember. And finally, on 24, Fritz suggested that there existed an older tradition behind the narrative, containing a report of a war of Rehoboam to win back the kingship, with the details being sparse and the number of men exaggerated. While we know of wars between the two kingdoms, especially regarding the possession of Benjamin's tribal area, we do not know of an attempt to restore the united monarchy. The verse suggests that it was God's will that the kingdoms are divided, and, quote, humankind is not allowed to try and nullify the division, end quote. Yeah, that's my part on this section. So,
Yeah.
Aaron?
All
sorry.
right.
I-
So, sorry.
Wait.
let's go.
Before we read this next section, so this is about Jeroboam's golden calves. So the thing is, since like the 1800s, people have like already recognized like that there was like a connection here, but it wasn't until the 1960s that scholars actually listed all the connections, and there were like way more than people like initially thought. So like the paper that was written on this, it was from Moses Aberbach and Levi Smoller, and they list, I think, 13 parallels between this story and the story of the golden calf in Exodus. So like so aside from, so if you'll just I don't know if I should read these parallels before or after. Maybe after. Let's do it after.
Maybe after, but I do just want to point out, in this narrative, these locations with the calves are meant to be put up as an alternative to the temple, when in reality, the temple was the later addition to these, at least several of these, and particularly the two big ones at Dan and Beersheba, ancient holy sites at which there had been worship from many gods for a very long time. And the symbolism of the bull and El Elyon, who was the northern god and the southern god, it's seen in retrospect. But yeah, the narrative here is very much a retcon, fix it, not anything that actually occurred.
Well, I have my own views on this. So will and I mean a lot of scholars also hold it, but I think this is the original version of the story, and then the author of the portion in Exodus used this. But either way, we'll get into it.
No, that makes sense for the from them. Then it's foreshadowing for them. I think you're right about
So I got a comment from Bruno Zygerts, offers $2 Canadian. Says, trust me, you people are not boring.
What if I read everything in a more monotone voice?
Bueller.
Challenge accepted.
Take the compliment, Lawrence.
He's like Jimmy. He doesn't like to receive compliments.
I really get that more than you know. But should we begin? Should I continue reading?
Yeah. Yes,
Okay.
You should.
Then Jeroboam built Shechem in the hill country of Ephraim and resided there. He went out from there and built Penuel. Then Jeroboam said to himself, now, the kingdom may well revert to the house of David if this people continues to go up to offer sacrifices at the house of the Lord of Jerusalem. The heart of this people will turn again to their master, King Rehoboam of Judah. They will kill me and return to King Rehoboam of Judah. So the king took counsel and made 2 calves of gold, because you have to do that. You have to make a calf out of gold. And
so much sense.
And the creator of the universe has to tell this story instead of any kind of useful information. So the king took the counsel and made 2 calves of gold. He said to the people, you have gone up to Jerusalem long enough. Here are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. So the golden calves, 2 of them, these are the gods that brought you out of the land of Egypt.
Just
Really?
just keep going.
Yeah, okay. He set one in Bethel, and the other he put in Dan. And Dan was not at all happy about it, because you won't believe where we put it.
Hey, I thought bulls were well endowed.
And this thing became a sin. For the people went to worship before the one at Bethel and before the other as far as Dan. He also made houses on high places and appointed priests from all the people who were not Levites. Fucking Levites. Jeroboam appointed a festival on the 15th day of the 8th month, like the festival was in Judah. And he offered sacrifices on the altars. So he did in Bethel, sacrificing the calves that he had made. And you're going to sacrifice the golden calves.
I think it's
Sacrificing to the calves, I think.
To the calves, yeah.
To the calves, sacrificing to the calves. Oh, perfectly, yes. Yes. And we're going to sacrifice beef to the... Oh, never mind. And he placed in Bethel the priests of the high places that he had made. He made the priests 2? Okay. He went up to the altar that he had made in Bethel on the 15th day in the 8th month, in the month he had selected on his own. He appointed a festival for the people of Israel, and he went up to the altar to offer incense.
All right. So, first things first, let's talk about some of these parallels. So some of them should be blatantly obvious. The fact that there is a golden calf should be the most obvious. So I do want to point out that the Dan, the inclusion of Dan there, might be a later addition, because if we notice throughout the story, the rest of it is about Bethel, because that would have been like the competing house of worship. But either way, so it does say that he had these 2 golden calves. That would be like obviously the biggest parallel. They're both going to be referred to, or they both have been referred to as molten images. I think in chapter 14 we get some more stuff about this, where they're called molten images. And when Jeroboam announces these calves, he says, here are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. But it's very, very close to what is said in Exodus, where I think the phrasing is like here, what was it? Here are your gods, right?
And that might have been singular.
No, sorry.
Translation issue.
Yeah, I mean,
I
forget which one's.
It's probably going to be singular.
The issue is they say almost synonymously the same thing. So Aaron builds an altar for the calf worship. Jeroboam does the exact same thing. And this is me reading from the paper here. After the construction of the altar is completed, Aaron proclaims a feast unto the Lord. Jeroboam also does that. In both narratives, we are informed that sacrifices are offered for the golden calves. In Exodus, it says that they offered burnt offerings and peace offerings. And let's see what else. Jeroboam appoints priests who are not of the tribe of Levi to actually minister to these things. So when he says here in verse 31, he also made houses on high places and appointed priests from among all the people who were not Levites. Now remember how right after the golden calf narrative, how Moses tells the people standing behind him on his side to kill the people on the other side. But it also says that specifically the Levites stood behind Moses.
Yeah, wasn't it when he was asking who's with Yahweh?
Yeah.
Right? Whoever sided with Yahweh, and it was just
whoever's
the
on the Lord's side, come to me.
Yeah,
and then
specifically the Levites came.
The
So
Levites were the ones who did the killing of their brothers, and that's how they earned the priesthood.
yeah. So in this section, it's specifically the people who would be like not part of this idolatry would be the Levites. So they are, they haven't sinned. So in both accounts, the golden calves made by Aaron and Jeroboam, respectively, are described as the sin par excellence, and this is done with repeated emphasis, even where the context does not necessarily require it. So it's like the biggest possible sin for them, both of them. Both Aaron and Jeroboam come under severe divine displeasure, and both are threatened with annihilation, yet eventually both of them come to a natural end. So we're going to get the end of Jeroboam in 1 Kings.
Yeah,
14.
that is an interesting part, because the sin is such a big thing and God gets really pissy about it. But the person who's actually physically responsible, whether Jeroboam or Aaron, who's, I have no idea how this came out of the fire. It just, oops, I made an idol. Whoops.
I just threw it in the fire and out it came.
And poof, magic. There's a golden calf. Whoopsie daisy. It's
Aaron's...
like the guy who accidentally cheated. I accidentally got your sister pregnant, I swear. But like, it's the same vibe. But at the same time, the person who actually made the choice doesn't actually pay the price and remains in their position of power, because Aaron was then made the high priest, and Jeroboam obviously is king at this point. But he retains his crown, and it's just, it's very much that vibe.
And also in chapter 13, that man of God that comes, it's sort of like the Moses coming down the mountain to find Aaron.
It is like that. In fact, so like in the next chapter, we're gonna see that that Jeroboam, his hand withers. So like this man of God is like also kind of intercessing for him in that chapter, and that's exactly what Moses asked God to spare Israel. The desecration of Jeroboam's altar at Bethel by Josiah, king of Judah, was accomplished by the act of slaying on it the priests of the high places, and also by burning human bones on it. So there, let's see, the destruction of the golden calf made by Aaron and of Jeroboam's altars at Bethel. We'll get to it later when they actually get destroyed. But the way that they're done is very similar, and even the wording of the two accounts is remarkably similar. Aaron's golden calf and Jeroboam's altar are both burnt and ground into a fine dust. In addition to the punishments imposed on the Israelites by Moses and the Levites for worshiping the golden calf, they also suffer additional retribution at the hands of God, who, we are told, smote the people because they made the calf.
You were right. Sorry, I looked back at Exodus, and you were right when it said these are your gods, plural. But the possible alternate, a god.
So the most decisive evidence of the close connection between Aaron and Jeroboam is the fact that the two eldest sons of Aaron. So this is going to be a little hard to follow. So keep up. Nadab and Abihu, so the sons of Aaron, and the two recorded sons of Jeroboam, Nadab and Abiah, they have very similar names. It is also remarkable that both the two eldest sons of Aaron and the two sons of Jeroboam die in the prime of their life, the former in their father's lifetime, while the latter, Abiah, dies in his father's lifetime. So that's going to be again in 1 Kings 14. And Nadab is murdered in the second year of his reign. As for the cause of their deaths, the two eldest sons of Aaron die because they burnt incense and offer a strange fire, presumably in idolatrous act before the Lord. While nothing corresponding to this is recorded of Jeroboam's sons, Jeroboam himself is reported to have offered incense at the calf altar in Bethel. After the fiery death, the two sons of Aaron are extolled as having been close to the Almighty and praised as having contributed by their untimely faith to the glorification of God. So that's in Leviticus. All Israel was to bewail their death. Similarly, Abiah, son of Jeroboam, is praised, quote, because in him there is found some good thing toward the Lord. Again, 1 Kings 14. So the amount of similarities is crazy. And to me, like, here's what we do know. We know that in ancient Israel, there was calf worship. We know that. We have references in Hosea about the kissing of calf statues. We have archaeological evidence from the period where there are just these little golden calves. I think they're not made of gold. I think they're like bronze or copper or something. But they're little statuettes of calves. The reason for that, of course, is because gods like El and Baal were worshipped in these forms. And honestly, I think that a story like this actually happened. I think that Jeroboam did erect at least one calf statue or calf altar that was seen as a bad thing in later periods, obviously. And the author of Exodus took that story, that narrative, to show, like, the kind of like the prime, to use the words from before, it is the sin par excellence. So he is the author of Exodus would be taking this historical reality in some sense, some form of historicity, and then writing a mythological narrative in which he is attacking specifically calf worship or bull worship, and kind of giving that mythological background to the sin of Jeroboam.
Yeah. No, that makes a ton of sense. It just, what struck me at the beginning of this is that these sacred locations in Dan and Bethel, and these, the practice of having idols there and worship there and incense and so forth, this would have been far more ancient, established. And there's just this excuse of, oh, it's Jeroboam came up with all of this. In reality, for the king to have commissioned an idol in the high places would have been entirely normal and not remarked on at all at the time. It would have been the most absolute. Of course the king wants favor with the gods and put up a nice statue. What kind of idiot are you? Just duh, it's expected. But then later to try and turn it into this grand event and mythologize it, as you say, and because again, the Deuteronomist voice from the time of Josiah is really focusing on Yahwist alone worship, the idea that worshiping any other god is wrong, at least for the Jews to do, and which wasn't, like, the time that they're writing about, that wasn't the case. Nobody, it was, there were lots of gods. It was fine.
Yeah, it wouldn't have been a big thing for them.
No, not at all.
Well, in later periods, it would have.
Yeah, and that's why you get the retcons that make it a huge issue, something that wouldn't have even been noticeable.
Wasn't the epithet, the bull of heaven, an epithet for the Canaanite Baal, the god Baal? Wasn't it the bull of heaven?
I don't remember an exact epithet for him being that. It might be.
He was sometimes represented by a bull, but
He
so
was.
was El
Had
Elyon
horns.
from the north.
Yes, that is also
The horns
true.
of power of El Elyon, the northern god. So that'll come up later.
So yeah, I mean, I wonder if part of this is also just simply polemicizing against the religion of the ancient Israelites or the ancient Canaanites or the Phoenicians, whoever.
Yeah, they're so I do actually have a video on this. You can just look up the search for the golden calf on my channel. So I do have a video on it. And then I think his name is Scott Chalmers. I think he wrote a book. It's an analysis of Hosea, but he does go pretty in detail about the golden calves, calf worship. There's Ted Lewis's book, or Theodore Lewis's book, the origins and character of God, or the character and origins of God, or something like that, where he has a very lengthy section on the same thing.
It's that was that distinction between the calf northern god El Elyon and the Yahweh of the south, and realizing how that was preserved in the text. It was the thing that broke my faith finally. Because I couldn't unsee it once I had seen it. And they'll be very soon, or well, I don't know. Eventually, we'll get to the story that I remember. But yeah.
Can you expand on that just for a moment?
I was a Christian for many years, and during those years, I was trying to find my way through, childish ideas to what I thought the truth would eventually be something more nuanced and complicated and mature, but still part of the faith. And actually, what it was, which is a very accurate, albeit a simplification, was Evidence, the series Why I Am No Longer a Christian. And he describes what he was taught by reading certain things. It talks about the basic documentary hypothesis, and obviously we try and go beyond that, but and the two gods of the North and South. And again, the realities are a bit more complicated, but the principle is true. That the northern god was El Elyon, which was represented by a bull, and the southern god was Yahweh, and these were later meshed together. There's a lot of it's more complicated, but I remembered a story, which there's a version where the prophet in question is Micah, and there's a version where the prophet in question is Elisha, where the king of Israel and Judah want to go to battle together, and the king for Judah comes up and to the kingdom, and they have 50 prophets of God. In the text it says God, G-O-D, prophesying that they will be successful and victorious and blah 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 blah. And the king of Judah goes, that's great, do you have any prophets of the Lord here? And as we've pointed out several times, when it's El, they say God. When it's Yahweh, they say the Lord in the text, the all capital Lord. And that had always stuck in my mind. For years and years, I never understood that, because you just had 50 fucking prophets. Why do you need another one? But when I heard this and that story came back to my mind, because I have the memory I have, and it's a blessing as much as a curse, I could never unsee it. These were two different gods. And it was only reinforced by the later part of the text, where one of the prophets of God insults the prophet of Yahweh with bull's horns, and thus says, I will gore thee, blah, 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 blah. And I could just never unsee it again. And I learned more, and obviously, as I've said, it's not as simple as it was represented in that video, nor do I think anyone expects it to be. But the basic division of these were never the same God, and every attempt to retcon it, lets through so many hints of the polytheistic origin. And once God was just another mishmash of old ideas that had been repurposed 1,000 times, there was nothing left to worship. There was nothing sacred. There was nothing divine. It was just humans making excuses.
Thank you for that.
Thank you for letting me tell the story.
All right, I'm going to read a couple of comments here. Mojo says, people, what does Ephraim mean?
It's he's talking about the tribe, Ephraim. Yeah, Ephraimites. Ephraim.
Then Iconicer says, you have to understand, Aaron, God can't include everything. You can't have this story and a prohibition against slavery. Hashtag priorities and morality. I detect sarcasm.
Un petit peu.
Then Sable Eagle says, no, never sacrifice beef to cows, for that way madness lies. And if anybody that doesn't get that, people who were farmers were actually feeding beef to their cattle ended up with mad cow disease.
Thomas, did you finish?
And Trump worked in McDonald's. I think it's starting to make sense, Arn.
Okay, well, before we get into that, let's let Tomer do his commentary.
Oh, he says, do you have commentary?
Yes. So, on 25, Shechem. Sweeney writes that Shechem is the logical choice for the rule of the Central Hill Country, based on its strategic location at this intersection of the road system in the northern Israelite hills that provides access to Judah to the south, the Jordan Valley to the east, the coastal plain to the west, and the Jezreel Valley to the north. On Peniel, in Hebrew it's Penuel. The exact location of Penuel is unknown. According to Genesis 32:32, Judges 8 verses 8, 9, and 17, it was situated in Transjordan in Wadi Yabok. Cogan notes that it has been identified as either Tulul et Dahab esh Shirkieh, according to Aharoni, or as Tel El Chama, according to Kalai. Fritz favors Lemeyer's identification with Tel Der Allah, since it was populated from Second Late Bronze until the age of the Iron Age. Until the end of the Iron Age. On verse 28, after seeking advice, Kara, based on Talmud Yerushalmi Avodah Zarah 1:1, gives an account of such counseling, or at least how he writes it. Quote, to all Israel he placed a righteous person with a wicked one. The wicked asked the righteous, which generation is preferred? The righteous said, the wilderness generation. The wicked said, but did they not worship idols? The righteous answered, because they were beloved, they were not punished. The wicked said, be quiet, for the king wants to do the same. As it is written, the day they made our king sick and officials with the poison of wine, he gave his hand to traitors. Hosea 7:5. And Sweeney writes that the note regarding the council, quote, hardly inspires confidence insofar as the book of Judges points to Ephraim as an abusive tribe that will provoke civil war to advance its own power, and to the northern tribes in general as subject to Canaanite religious influence, end quote. On the two golden calves, Cogan writes that Jeroboam's choice of a calf is likely linked to Israelite tradition and the calf built by Aaron, both in its form and function. According to the tale, quote, the calf was meant to attract Yahweh to a new resting place within the camp, luring the deity back after the long absence of Moses, which broke off the communication between Yahweh and Israel, end quote. He writes that this tradition, while denigrated in the Pentateuchal rendition, may have been known in northern Israelite circles in a positive form, and thus have served Jeroboam in promoting a cult independent of the Jerusalem temple. Likewise, Fritz writes that the Exodus narrative is probably based on a tradition that traces the bulls in Bethel back to Aaron, and thereby legitimizes them. And DeVries comments, quote, all around Israel, and in the numerous Canaanite enclaves within its territory, were half Yahwists to whom the calf or bull was the symbol of male fecundity. Officially or unofficially, Baalism was in the land. It was destined in the days of Ahab to gain the mastery. Thus, the golden calves could have done nothing but confuse and mislead. Perhaps Jeroboam did not intend it so, but that he should have chosen such a symbol to represent Yahweh shows that he may have been but a half Yahwist himself. End quote. On verse 29,
all of that seem to assume that the story of Aaron is older than the story of Jeroboam.
Yes.
Which, as Lawrence pointed out, it actually isn't.
Well, that's what I gathered from the commentators. So, on verse 29, On verse 29, DeVries writes that the reason for installing Yahweh's symbols in the ancient shrines of Bethel and Dan was rightly interpreted by the maker of the report as having a political purpose. He writes, quote, "So long as Israelites from north of the border continued their thrice annual pilgrimages to Yahweh's temple in Jerusalem, they were likely to run away, or at least become disloyal and ready to form a revolution, or ferment revolution," end quote. Sweeney writes that Jeroboam's decision, quote, "ensures that the people will bring their prescribed offerings to support the royal establishment and the priesthood of the temples," end quote. Kimchi writes that this decision was also ideological. Quote, "He said to them, 'This place,' i.e. Bethel, 'is also chosen, like Jerusalem, for Jacob had said of this very place, it will be a house of God.'" Genesis 28:22, end quote. On 30 and 31, Sweeney comments, "The text labels Jeroboam's establishment of cultic centers in Bethel and Dan as a sin that led the people astray from their obligation to observe the covenant with Yahweh, as we see in Deuteronomy 5, 8-10, 12:29 through 13:19, who may be worshipped only at the one place in the land that Yahweh designates, Deuteronomy 12:2-28. Jeroboam violates the covenant as stipulated in Deuteronomy, and presupposed throughout DH. Such a characterization of Jeroboam's actions hardly constitutes the work of northern circles, who sought to bring Israel into conformity with its covenant traditions. After all, there is never an attempt to close the temples at Dan or Bethel in the northern kingdom. Such polemics represent Judean interests that sought to justify the belief that Yahweh had chosen Jerusalem as the true worship site and the house of David as the true monarchs of Israel. On and finally, verse 32, the 8th month. The festival is identified with the Feast of Booths, i.e. Sukkoth, which is celebrated in the 7th month, according to Leviticus 23, verses 33 through 43, and Numbers 29, 12 through 39. Kimchi wrote that Jeroboam established the festival in the 8th month in order to distance Israel from the Jerusalemite laws. He also suggested that those who went to Jerusalem to celebrate the festival on the 7th month could return to the kingdom of Israel and celebrate the festival on the 8th month. Cogan notes Talmud's opinion that the 1 month difference has been sought as... he notes Talmud's opinion that the 1 month difference has been sought in, quote, actual climatic and agricultural conditions prevalent in the north of Palestine, end quote, where crops ripened later than in the south. He also notes that Wolfwein suggested that the dating of Sukkoth in Leviticus 23:34 was determined at a later period, whilst DH did not have a fixed date for the feast. DeVries suggested that Jeroboam was observing a different new year from the new proclaimed by the Jerusalem priesthood. He writes, quote, "The Hebrew lunar solar calendar, with 355 days, got out of synchronism every 2 or 3 years, requiring the addition of an intercalary month. Thus, it could have happened that Jeroboam actually did observe the Feast of Tabernacles in his 7th month, as required by Numbers 29, verses 12 through 39. But this may have been the 8th month according to Jerusalemite reckoning. Thus, this was no innovation, just an expression of Jeroboam's independence of Jerusalem." Yeah, and no ancient Christians.
Oh, I thought one of them would say that Aaron and the golden calves was a what do they use? A fulfillment of, or the other way around, I should say. That these golden calves are a fulfillment of the other golden calves.
Yeah, something like that.
No, not really.
Joking. It's just that they like to do that with Jesus. So.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm seeing that the next chapter is only 33 verses.
I mean, we're not going to do that. I mean, we reached our
We're
3-hour
over time.
limit. Yeah.
Yeah, plus I got my my premiere starting soon.
Yes, looking forward to that very much, sincerely. All right. Anybody have any closing comments besides
Joining the Discord?
I
Yeah,
think
join the
there's
Discord.
a comment
And
you didn't read, no?
Yeah, there's a comment.
Yeah, there's one comment. Yeah.
Oh, wait, let me grab that. Okay, so Mojo says, In a Berber language, or some Berber languages,
I mean,
Ifri means
Tamazic.
cave, where Africa maybe came from. I thought Ephraim was a link to this. Like Yuar means new moon in Berber, and Yuarek in Hebrew.
Yoreach.
Yareach,
It's
I believe.
Yareach. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, Tamazic, Berber languages are going to have some influence from, Punic, which is like Western Semitic, like Hebrew, and it's also going to have influence from Arabic. So probably, the similarity of the word moon could be one of those. Could be Arabic, could be from the Carthaginians. But yeah, Ifri and Ephraim don't have a connection. And yeah, I think we mentioned this before. The word Africa we don't know exactly where it comes from, but yeah, it's one of the ideas might be that it might be a Tamazic word for a local tribe who are named
Fair enough.
after some cave or something. I think
And
there's a town called
4,000
Ephraim.
offers $20. Thank you very much, and says, "Thank you for the show."
Thank you.
All right, I have
love-
another show to jump onto soon after this. Anybody have any closing comments beyond that?
Join the Discord. Go watch the and hopefully Peter is putting the link to both of the channel and the video in chat because he's such a great guy. So yeah, the video about to premiere, the Bible and abortion. It's gonna be fun. I'm gonna ruffle some feathers. Yeah.
So excited.
Yeah.
So excited.
I would say everybody have a happy unholy days or whatever you
Damn
want to
right.
call them.
Yes,
Mm.
celebrate the pagan festival of Yule and the birth of Sir Isaac Newton, who gave us physics. And if you want Christmas, I always recommend Dickens because he had a good view on Christmas. Anyway, love you all.
No pun intended
Someone,
right?
Someone got told off by their Christian father for wearing ghost earrings, but on Christmas, and they were like, "What's ghost got to do with Christmas? Like, tell me one thing that a ghost has got to do with Christmas." And the person's like, "Okay, let me Google A Christmas Carol."
Yeah.
Or you could say it was the Holy Ghost who knocked up Mary, if they're that
you
kind.
could
Yeah,
But
I know.
either way.
I am the ghost of Christmas earrings.
Ooh, I see you have already blessed me.
All right. Good night.
Night.